Well, this is it. This is the place, because this is where the earliest human remains in the entire world were discovered. It's been really difficult to find it. It's taken us 4 hours to walk here, and we've been a circuitous route through the bush. And it seems really strange that there's nothing to mark it, because this is such an important place in our story. And it's as close as I can get to where we all began. Amazing.
And this is what the archaeologists discovered.
This is a cast of the skull that was found here and which was dated to 195,000 years ago. I think, considering it's so old, it's remarkably complete. OK, the fragile face bones are missing, but most of the brain cases here, we can see the size of the brain and we can see this very characteristic forehead.
No other remains of our species, even approaching this age, have been found anywhere else on the planet. This is as near as we can get to the origin of our species.
There's something very special about sitting here, looking out at the Omo. I could be on the banks of any African river, apart from the fact we know that this landscape has been home to humans, people like you and me, for nearly 200,000 years.
I'm heading along the South African coast to a place called Pinnacle Point. Today, it's a playground for the rich. But during the construction of this golf course, archaeologists discovered something amazing deep beneath the fairway. This could be the oldest known dwelling of our species anywhere in the world.
So this is where you've been digging?
This is the oldest part of the cave.
What are the dates here then as we go down through these layers?
These layers date from 130 to 167,000 years ago.
It's just so incredibly ancient.
It's amazing.
Did you know how important what you were excavating really was?
Not until we got those dates. But yeah, amazing, stunning.
The evidence in this cave reveals that those ancient families were behaving in ways quite unlike previous species of human.
Well, Kyle, that's not from this cave, is it? Because I recognise this. This is a hand axe, isn't it?
That's correct. Now, that's more typical of what you would find from about 1.5 million years ago to about 300,000 years ago.
So what sort of thing were you finding in the cave then?
Okay, well, tools like these, blades and points, are much more typical of what we find in this cave. Made on quartzite, locally available on the beach down here. And in our oldest levels here, alongside these types of tools, we also have these very small bladelet tools.
These are tiny.
What could such minute blades have been used for?
Obviously, these weren't used just in your hand like this, so how would they have been used?
It's more likely that those were set in some kind of a handle to make a compound tool, maybe something more like this. This is a series of small blades set into a handle for use as a knife.
Yes, I think that would work. So you think that's how these stone tools were used then, as a knife?
That's one possibility, and it's also possible they would have been used for hunting weapons.
Kyle and his team have discovered you can make some lethal weapons with these bladelets.
This one looks particularly vicious, I think.
This is one interpretation of how those small back blades might have been mounted. advantage to this would be that there's these barbs that would prevent the tip from pulling out immediately and would inflict a greater injury.
Well, I'm going to be spending the night out here in the bush, presumably something our ancestors did all the time, but years of living in civilization have softened me. I've got a big torch here so that if anything comes by I can get a better look at it in the dark. And I've got this little camera so I can make a video diary throughout the night and talk about what comes along. I'm doing this for real. I'm going to be out here all night and I really am quite scared.
It's just amazing the amount of noises you suddenly hear. About half an hour ago, there was the sound, really distinct sound of something lapping water. Maybe a hyena, maybe a leopard. It sounded like a big cat, literally like a cat lapping at milk. Hopefully nothing can get through that. Suddenly feel really vulnerable as an animal which is designed to be out in the daylight. I mean, can't see very well at night. Hearing's alright, just about enough to get you feeling scared. And sense of smell as well. Compared to all those other animals, might as well not have it. Did you hear that? I'm scared now. Is that a lion? Is that a leopard? Is that a hyena? Oh, I don't like that noise. That's really spooky.
That's got to be one of the most frightening nights of my life. I did get some sleep, but then I got woken up by these horrendous noises. Sometimes it was hyenas, and then there was something that sounded like a standoff between a hyena and a leopard or something. I don't know what it was. Awful noises. Really, really scary.
With the return of the crew, I pluck up my courage and look for signs of the animals that I heard in the night.
Oh, just look at this. This is a big male leopard paw print, and there are large hyena prints as well. So these predators, these carnivores, were literally here, about 25 metres away from where I was sleeping, underneath that tree. They sounded really close during the night, and I can see now that they were.
Petersburg, the former imperial capital of Russia. The Hermitage is one of the world's greatest museums, home to some of the most celebrated works of art. But there's something else here too. It's not on display, but it's every bit as precious. Here in the storerooms are a few objects that could unlock the secrets of those Siberian families struggling in the depths of the Ice Age.
What is really striking about these objects from the height of the last Ice Age is that they're found in just a few places in the south of Siberia, which is interesting because it suggests that as the climate worsened, these prehistoric people retreated into refuges where it still would have been very cold, but they would have been just able to survive.
People vanished from the frozen wastes of northern Siberia. To the south, one of the refuges they gathered in is now called Maltar. So can the few remains found here tell us anything about what happened?
Just look at these tiny blades from the Ice Age. They are unusually small, and the archaeologists think this is because the appalling cold made it difficult to reach the quarries. So the stone itself was such a precious resource that they were using it to its utmost, getting as many blades as they could out of it. So the blades themselves got smaller and smaller. And something extraordinary was happening during this period. In spite of that struggle for survival, there was a blossoming of art. Now, we may never know the meaning of this beautiful pair of swans to the people that made them, but archaeologists have suggested that they might be hunting charms, that when the first swans flew, the first deer would appear, and it was the beginning of the spring hunting season. And how they must have longed for spring.
Many of the objects in this collection are mysterious. This unique plate is made from mammoth ivory. Some have suggested it's a map showing the physical and spiritual worlds, with a connection between them symbolised by a hole in the middle. These precious bone figurines are amongst the earliest depictions of people wearing fur, further proof that plenty of these Asian pioneers could sew clothes by this time.
And finally, there are these delicate and beautiful little statues of women, and some of them are pierced, so they may have been worn as pendants, perhaps amulets. It's possible that they're fertility symbols, really underlining the importance and difficulty of producing children during such harsh conditions. And in fact, some archaeologists see this entire, very beautiful collection as a cry to the spirits in a time of stress and struggle.
Finally, I'm allowed in to see the plaster casts of the Homo erectus skulls from the lower cave. And Professor Wu has a surprise waiting.
Well, you see, this is the original specimen.
That's the original?
Yes, original. As you know, most of the original specimens lost during the war.
I didn't know any of it had survived.
Yeah, after the war, we have done some new excavation,
Right.
and got some new specimens.
Can I hold it?
Yes, yes.
I honestly thought all the specimens had been lost, but this is an actual fossil of Homo erectus in China.
It's found in 1966.
So this is hundreds of thousands of years old, isn't it?
So this is another piece.
It's just amazing for me to be holding in my hand this actual fossil, which is hundreds of thousands of years old. I honestly thought all I would see is casts, is reconstructions, and this is the actual
and now
fossil.
you hold the original one.
That's amazing.
But even more important is what Professor Wu has spotted in these fossils. First, he shows me some features of the ancient erectus skulls that he believes are typically Chinese.
The face is flat. The nose is flat, not very protrude, as in Europe.
Yeah. Yeah.
And this part is also flat.
So this part of the cheekbones is
Yeah,
sort of rotated.
For example, in
like that.
Neanderthal.
Then he shows me the much more recent upper cave skulls and picks out the same distinctively Chinese features.
But it also have the more flat face and not very protruding nose.
So the features that you're looking at in these skulls are really the features which characterise modern Chinese people today. And the
Yes.
sort of differences between your skull and my skull.
Yes. So your face here is
Yeah.
like this, and mine
And yours is
like
flatter.
yes,
Yeah.
different.
And your nose is flatter
So
here than mine.
we inherited some features from our ancestor.
Professor Wu sees a clear line, Homo erectus evolving into upper caveman, becoming today's Chinese. For him, these fossils prove that the Chinese come from a completely different branch of the human family. But I can see significant differences between the skulls. The whole skull shape of Homo erectus is quite different from modern humans. And even those features that Wu pointed out, the nose and the cheekbones, don't seem that similar to me.
Professor B, I mean, you spent a lifetime studying these skulls, and I'm a complete novice in comparison. But I look at this modern skull here, this 30,000-year-old skull from Zhoukoudian, and this looks quite similar to me to other skulls from Europe at the same time. So I don't think it doesn't look Chinese to me.
No, but the profile in Europe is different.
Quite subtle though, isn't it? I'm still not convinced that the Chinese are so fundamentally different from the rest of us. Professor Wu's so knowledgeable and his arguments are so persuasive, so maybe I'm missing something.
What was it that turned hunter-gatherers into empire builders? I'm travelling through the awe-inspiring landscape of Guilin in South China in search of the key to their success. This is the Zhangpian Cave. Excavations here tell us it was once lived in by hunter-gatherers. And in 2001, a wonderful discovery was made.
These fragments are so precious that I'm not even allowed to touch them. They are what remains of one of the oldest pots in China. In fact, one of the oldest pots in the world. So who made this pot? Well, the people living in this cave so many thousands of years ago would have been nomadic hunter-gatherers, still living an ancient lifestyle in many ways. But those insignificant-looking, crude pieces of pot mark a great technological leap forward. So prehistoric pottery has also been found in this cave?
Pots are something we take for granted. But for those ancient hunter-gatherers, pottery was part of a completely new way of life. So how did they do it? I'm meeting a team of experimental archaeologists who think they might have the answer. The first breakthrough must have been finding out how to stop the pots cracking when they were fired, tempering them by mixing calcite rock with the clay. And they even have an idea how the pots might have been shaped thousands of years before the invention of the potter's wheel.
This is very clever. They've dug a pit here to basically give us the form of the pot, almost like a mould. And then we're pressing this clay in little slabs down into the preformed pit.
Transforming clay into hard pottery requires firing at a high temperature. Today, this is done at 1,000 degrees Celsius in a kiln, way beyond the capabilities of those hunter-gatherers. They would have had open fires, which only produce temperatures of about 250 degrees. I'm quite doubtful this is going to be enough. So how's our pot?
Ooh, I think that's it. I think that's our pot there, and it looks okay. Fantastic. There are many different theories about why the Chinese hunter-gatherers might have started making pots. Some people say it was a symbol of prestige, but the Chinese archaeologists think that the explanation is much more simple: cooking.
Pots meant that a wider range of food could be cooked and stored, vital in hard times. And by 9,000 years ago, there was another innovation: farming.
One of the things that those early Chinese potters would have been eating was wild rice. Now, it certainly wouldn't have been the main source of food because it was hard to collect and actually didn't give much energy in return. But despite the availability of other vegetables, it was rice that became more and more important and even crucial to the early success of the Chinese. Oh, I've seen pictures of the Great Cave at Nia, but nothing really prepares you for the sheer scale of it. Part of the excavation was known as Hell Trench, and stepping down into it, it's easy to see why, because it's suddenly very hot and humid, but all the hard work and the discomfort paid off because the archaeologists found something that was quite phenomenal. It's a human skull. It was in many pieces when it was first found, which had been carefully fitted back together like a jigsaw. And this is the top of the skull. It's unmistakably a modern human. It has a high, domed forehead.
The skull has been dated to nearly 40,000 years old. The oldest confirmed remains of our species in Southeast Asia. But Nia Cave also offers us a clue as to how these people survived in the challenging environment of the rainforest.
As you move just a little bit deeper into the cave, it becomes significantly cooler and more pleasant, and it just feels like an ideal place for those hunter-gatherers to have set up their camps, and then they could have gone off roaming into the forest. The archaeological evidence shows that they were bringing back a huge range of different foods to eat, from monkeys and pigs and lizards to shellfish, yams and sago palm.
Compared with other species, we're incredibly adaptable. To survive, we humans will eat just about anything. And as if to make exactly that point, in another corner of the cave, something really unusual is going on. I've arrived at harvesting time for the ingredient used in the Chinese delicacy, bird's nest soup. It's made from the nests of rare swiftlets, and today, these men are attempting a death-defying feat to gather them.
I mean, this is human ingenuity, isn't it? sweet little tiny swiftlet's nest, which has just been built out from the wall of the cave, made of saliva. It feels a bit like resin or something. It's very odd.
This is a reconstructed Neanderthal skeleton, and generally speaking, the skeleton is very similar to ours. Having said that, there are definite differences. The shape of all the bones is subtly different, and anywhere that muscles attach on this skeleton is much more prominent than it would be in a modern human. So this would have been a person who was much more heavily muscled, generally much more rugged looking than us today. They would have been formidable competitors. So Neanderthals were tougher and better cold adapted than us, and some of them even had bigger brains than modern humans. On the face of it then, it seems quite surprising that our species lasted very long at all. So how did we overcome the Neanderthals? Maybe our tools and weapons were just better than theirs. Well, for decades, that's exactly what the experts thought. But this idea hadn't been thoroughly tested until now. So how are you doing?
Oh, doing all right.
Bruce Bradley and Metin Erin spent over a year making thousands of basic cutting tools.
So we've got these two tools. This one, a basic tool made by a Neanderthal, and this one, a basic tool made by a modern human at the same sort of period.
Correct.
Now, they're obviously very different looking. This one's long and thin, and this one is round. But are they different in terms of function, in terms of what they're used for?
They were used for the same kind of tasks, mostly cutting tasks.
So, for example, I mean, both are really sharp. If you want to use both of those to cut, some pretty thick leather here.
This is a typical Neanderthal tool.
Exactly. You can see that it just cuts through this really thick leather very easily.
That is incredibly sharp. Look at that. Wow.
And this is really tough leather.
Effective, isn't it?
So,
That's brilliant.
yeah. Now let's try the blade.
Hold it very carefully.
Yes. This is the sort of thing that was made by modern humans.
Exactly.
If anything, I would say that flake is a bit, I mean, that's cutting, but just, you know, just picking up the tool and using it immediately, I'd say the flake's actually a little bit easier to use.
When we created thousands of tools, we found that the technology of the Neanderthals actually produced more cutting edge overall. It wasted less raw material, and you could produce more tools than the blade cores of modern Homo sapiens.
Now, Martin, that's very new, isn't it? It's quite remarkable, because you're telling me that the Neanderthal technology is just as good, in fact, if not better, than the modern humans. I mean, that goes against everything that people have said for the last few decades.
That's true, and it was a very exciting result.
It's just one study on one aspect of toolmaking. But I still think it's important. This is fascinating, and it means that the long-standing theory about modern human technology being superior to Neanderthal stone tools just doesn't stand up. I'm in Gibraltar, a naval stronghold for centuries, and new evidence from these rocky shores suggests that thousands of years after they disappeared from the rest of Europe, the Neanderthals were clinging on here. When Neanderthals lived here, sea levels were up to 100 metres lower, so much of the evidence from that time could be underwater. A team of specialists is probing the ocean floor, looking for traces of the Gibraltar Neanderthals.
We've come to a stop now because we are over the archaeological site. It's about 20 metres below the surface of the sea below us. Divers are all getting ready, and these are divers but also archaeologists, so they're going to be excavating the sea bottom in search of Neanderthals.
These divers are up against poor visibility with a limited oxygen supply. Underwater archaeology is always challenging. But Clive Finlayson has already made a series of significant discoveries in the sea caves nearby.
This is where the last Neanderthals made their last stand, if you like, 24,000 years ago. We get the feeling it's the nearest thing to Neanderthal city you're going to find anywhere. We've got fossils, stone tools, animals that have been butchering, all kinds of evidence, hearths, Neanderthal barbecues, if you like. It's a very, very special site.
They think that Neanderthals may have held on here long after they'd been wiped out in the rest of Europe. But after the Neanderthals finally disappeared from Gibraltar, there was a gap of 5,000 years before we turned up. So it looks as though whatever finally killed Neanderthals off, it wasn't us.
What do you think eventually wiped them out?
It may have been a numbers game. There's so few left, as would happen to populations of endangered species today, like the panda or tiger. Just random fluctuations in numbers can bring it down to zero, and there's no recovery from zero. So it could have been that. It could have been disease, inbreeding, a whole range of factors that can affect a small population and knock them over the edge.
I find it very moving to think that one day the last Neanderthal might have been sitting here, staring out to sea, and perhaps waiting for their companions to return. Or maybe he or she knew that they were the last of their tribe or their family, but they can't have known that they were the last of their entire species.
So that was the end of the Neanderthals. Or was it? Some scientists believe their descendants are still walking around today. If our ancestors interbred with them, some of us could be part Neanderthal. But they may not have survived at all had it not been for this. The rock shelters and caves that riddle the landscape. And deep underground, they left something that we still marvel at today.
I'm in a cave called Peshmerl, which is stunningly beautiful naturally, but look at this. This is real artistic expression, something that defines us and sets us apart as a species. And Peshmerl is unusual because artists were coming here to paint these images both before and after the peak of the last ice age, generations of them returning to the cave as the world outside froze over. This is a very beautiful image, and it uses the contours of the rock. The horse's back sort of curves along a bulge in the rock, and there's an echo of the horse's head on this right side there. And it's obviously a very stylised horse as well. And I love the way those spots carry on into the background, as though the horse is sort of camouflaged against the rock. And there's a hand placed against the rock just above the horse's back. I mean, that is amazing, isn't it? That's an Ice Age hand.
Michel Leblanche has devoted his life to studying the art found in caves like Peshmerl.
I naively imagined that you'd just take a mouthful of charcoal, bit of water and just spit it at the wall and that would be it. But of course all that would happen would be that the mess would run down the wall and obscure the stencil that you were trying to do. So you have to do it like this, using an almost dry mouth and just building it up very gradually with a fine spray. Monsieur Leblanche did a recreation of the horses at Peshmerl using this technique. It took him a whole week. Is it finished?
Yes.
It's finished?
Yes, that's right.
But what drove these people, struggling just to survive, to paint?
The vast majority of these images seem to be animals. There don't seem to be many representations of humans.
No, that's true. They are mainly animal figures. And for them, of course, animals were not only game, but also spirits, symbolic. So the animal figures are, in fact, symbolic figures.
And going into Peshmerl, I mean, it's such a beautiful cave with all the stalactites hanging down. And yes. It does feel as though it was, I don't know, almost a temple.
Yes, that's right. It is a natural temple, if you like. They are sacred sites. They are not painting just for fun. By painting a cave and having a sanctuary, it is a way for them to say, here is our sacred place. A painted cave is a symbolic of the whole tribe.
Being bound together in this way may have helped our ancestors survive the kind of climate change that only haunts our imaginations today. The discovery was made by a young Aboriginal Australian.
A young girl just stumbled across them, and she invited this professor over and he had a look at it, and people started getting excited when they thinking it could be a really major find.
So major that as soon as it was revealed, the site was buried again to protect it.
It's still secret today?
Yeah, and it will remain secret forever and a day according to the elders. This site is very precious. It's their past, we're going to preserve them and protect them for the future generations.
But I've come here on a special day because for the first time since the site was reburied, local Aboriginal people and archaeologists are gathering once more to check on their discovery. Over 500 human footprints.
This is the heel here. And you can see the way that the foot sort of lifts up here. That's where the arch of the foot would be. And then the big toe's just there. So this is a right foot. It's amazing to see something which is so ephemeral, sort of normally here today, gone tomorrow. This is looking like a pretty big footprint.
He's well fed.
It's incredibly hard, this layer, isn't it? It feels really stony. Is it a type of clay?
It's just like our pottery.
And it must feel pretty personal as well, because, you know, this is your own heritage, isn't it?
One of the oldest cultures in the world. So, very special and unique.
But who do the footprints belong to? Tanya Charles was here when they were found.
Other people that was with us, they were saying they belong to the farmers that were here, and we're like, nah, they're ours. You fellas wear shoes, we don't. We didn't back then. We just knew in our hearts, we knew that they were ours.
Scientists and Aboriginal trackers have interpreted the prints of men, women and children walking and running around the edges of what was once an ancient lake. The most bizarre track seems to have belonged to a one-legged man.
Like, we sort of knew that he only had 1 foot, but we didn't want to believe it.
Yeah.
Because, you know, 1-footed man way back in them times is like, oh, scary. And he was chasing a kangaroo, and on his first throw, he actually missed the kangaroo.
Right.
Yeah. On his second throw, he got him and dropped him down to one knee.
How long ago did these people live? With a new technique called luminescence dating, scientists could measure the tiniest glow when grains of sand from the footprints were analysed, and from this they could calculate how long the footprints had lain buried. The results were stunning. The footprints were around 20,000 years old.
There's something really intimate about this because it's just a moment in somebody's life when they walked across this landscape, and it just looks like it could be a footprint made yesterday, and yet it's about 20,000 years old.
So is this when people first reached Australia, long after we colonised Europe and Asia? It would certainly make sense, given how far away Australia is. Today on Flores, local people still tell stories of strange, human-like creatures, the cave-dwelling Ebugogo.
So I'd really, really like to know more about the story of Ebugogo.
According to our ancestors, there were Ebugogo in our land, in our village, a long time ago, around the 15th century.
Are they humans? I mean, are they like us?
They had two distinctive characteristics. They were like monkeys, but also like humans.
Their physical features were short, hefty, with long hair on the head and chest, and the female's breasts were big and long. If they wanted to walk, they usually threw their long breasts over their shoulders.
But nobody's seen one for a couple of 100 years.
They really did exist, and they were destroyed by our ancestors about 7 generations ago.
There were 2 reasons for their elimination. Firstly, because they stole food, and secondly, because they kidnapped our children.
This sounds like the sort of spooky myths you might hear anywhere. But believe it or not, this story may actually have some truth to it. Archaeologists were excavating in this cave on the island, looking for signs of the earliest modern humans, when they made a startling discovery. A small-bodied, small-brained creature, a type of human that nobody had ever seen before. It quickly became known as the Hobbit.
So this is the skeleton of this minute woman that the archaeologists found in the cave of Liang Bua on the island of Flores. And she is just absolutely tiny. When she was standing at her full height, she would have reached to about 1 metre tall.
She seems like an odd combination. Some bits look like us, but in miniature. Other parts look like more ancient human species.
People still are unsure about exactly who she is. Most people believe that she is indeed a different species. So it really does make us rethink what we think about ourselves and what we think about the whole human family as well.
Could the Hobbit have affected our ancestors' journey? Dating of the bones shows they were here around the time of the migration of our ancestors through Indonesia.
So would they have encountered this race, this population, of very tiny people and what would have happened if they did. I don't know what they would have thought about Homo sapiens.
If they really were the vicious Ebu Gogo, our ancestors might have been best advised to avoid Flores. So it looks as if small groups of men, women and children made that first push into America about 13,500 years ago. Using their sophisticated tools, they made the most of their new home and spread right across the continent from coast to coast.
Until recently, this was the version of American prehistory that most experts agreed on. But a new discovery here in Texas is threatening to rewrite the entire story.
Archaeologist Mike Collins is a very patient man. For 15 years, he's been digging away in this small field near Austin. And he's found something that no one expected.
So, Mike, what sort of dates have you got coming out here?
We have the entire prehistory of Central Texas represented at this site. The kinds of artifacts we find and the few absolute dates that we have tell us that people were here from 500 years ago back 13,500 years ago. Even more importantly, we have stuff below that.
Below Clovis, so older than Clovis?
Older than Clovis, pre-Clovis,
right
here at this site.
But for years, archaeologists have thought that Clovis was the first culture in the Americas.
You know, most archaeologists have thought that, but there's a few of us that have known better. And we're on the other side of the site. You can see the Clovis level, and you can see artifacts below it. You want to see that?
I'd love to see it.
Let's go see it.
Mike, this is an incredibly deep test pit.
Yes, it's a deep test pit, and we're really interested in this part of it right here. Because right through here we get Clovis artifacts, but as we dug down, we continue to get artifacts below that for about 20 or 25 centimeters more. A nice flake here, for example, with a platform and good flake scars on it. We have one date from down here of 14,400 years.
14,400?
Yeah.
So that's pre-Clovis?
By 1,000 years.
I mean, that's amazing because that makes us rethink all of our theories about early Americans.
Yes, we have to rethink our paradigm. We have to come up with a new accounting of the peopling of the Americas.
Mike, how sure are you about the date of these artifacts?
It's just one date, so you need to corroborate it with further evidence, and that's what we're working on.
Now, we can only draw tentative conclusions from the evidence emerging here, but our grand theory about how humans first got into North America is starting to look decidedly dodgy. Because if there really were people living here at Gault as early as Mike says there were, then there must have been another route into the Americas, because the ice-free corridor wasn't open yet. But what I need is more proof. And if the claims coming out of South America are to be believed, then they may have even earlier and more compelling evidence than I've seen here in Texas.
The finds from Monte Verde are nothing short of miraculous.
Quite strange, there's no evidence at all of it ever having been an archaeological site. There is sheep grazing. There's nothing obvious at all.
But a few years back, local villagers came across something strange sticking out of the riverbank. Bones from a mastodon. a prehistoric relative of the modern elephant.
It was a bank just like this that the animal bones were originally found in that alerted people to the fact that this was an archaeological site.
As experts dug down, they discovered much more than just ancient animal bones. Layer by layer, the remains of an entire human settlement emerged. Home to a community of perhaps 20 or 30 people, with shelters, work areas and rubbish tips, a unique relic of our prehistoric past.
The main structure on this site was a very long hut, 20 metres long. I'm going to have a go at measuring it out, but I think I might come into some difficulties because of where the stream is today. Because this log is actually around about 7 metres long. 10 metres is going to take me up to there. I don't want to go any further because I don't want to end up in that very cold stream. But you can imagine how far this hut extended.
And amazingly, we know how this hut was built, because the remains of the wooden stakes and the animal hides that covered it were preserved in the waterlogged ground.
And inside this long hut, the archaeologists found hearths, and in them the remains of nuts and berries and seeds that people had been eating. The hearths were lined with clay, and in part of this clay that presumably was wet at some point, there was somebody's footprint.
About 30 metres away was the strange outline of what was perhaps another, much smaller hut.
Outside it there were butchered mastodon bones, but inside it there were some very intriguing finds indeed. Some plant remains, a few of them seaweeds, that are still used by the Mapuche Indians today as medicines.
Incredibly, the team even discovered the remains of potato skins.
It's the first evidence anywhere in the world of humans eating potatoes. It's amazing to have this degree of preservation on an archaeological site. This really is a treasure trove.
Monteverdi gives us an incredibly rare and wonderful window into our ancestors' daily lives. But for all that, what's most astonishing about Monteverdi is its age. But that's nothing compared with the ice-free corridor 13,500 years ago. Any families coming through that corridor would surely have faced a hellish journey. Huddled against the howling wind in a land of torrential rivers and floating ice. So did anyone try? And if so, did they make it?
The answers to all these questions lie in that direction.
Because right across North America, archaeologists have been finding thousands of objects like this. They're called Clovis points. And they date from just a few hundred years after the corridor in the ice appeared. So this could have been the way in. But what kind of a world would these pioneers find on the other side of the ice? The tools themselves are important clues, and to find out how, I'm meeting archaeologist Andy Hemmings.
So these are these really classic stone Clovis spear points.
Yeah, it's important to understand about Clovis, though, that they aren't just stone points, they also made some very lethal and effective bone and ivory points as well. These are state-of-the-art lethal killing machines from 13,000 years ago.
And what sort of animals do you think they would have hunted with them?
The most common that we've found them directly associated with are mammoths, bison, and mastodon in that order. But at Clovis sites across the New World, we found more than 125 species of plants and animals.
So they're general hunters, but you really think they were hunting mammoths?
Oh, absolutely. The best example probably is a site in southeast Arizona where 8 Clovis points were found with one mammoth body. 5 of them were found behind the back of the head and in front of the shoulder blades, any one of which probably would have been about a lethal wound.
Andy shows me how he thinks they did it.
Andy, that doesn't look much like a mammoth to me.
There's no animal in the Pleistocene that had a hide that tough. And if we can poke a hole in that, if you can poke a hole in that, we could have eaten anything, just like the Clovis people did.
Right, so I've got my spear through it.
Let's see what you can do. A glancing blow, you've slowed him.
Got his feet.
Try again.
Ooh, scratched it. Do you want to show me how it's done, Andy?
I'll give it a try.
Oh my God. Well, that's made a hell of a dent in this metal door.
I hit it pretty cleanly, and you can see I just destroyed the end of my spear. It would have stuck in the hide of a mammoth or a mastodon.
Yeah.
The mammoth and mastodon, 2 of the mighty animals roaming this vast landscape. But little match for people with a weapon as deadly as the Clovis point. Some think that these pioneers of the new frontier plunged into an orgy of slaughter, wiping out Ice Age animals like the mammoth. The evidence is questionable, but that image of the mighty hunter has stuck.
Taken a lot of bravery to go in and stab something the size of a mammoth time and time again.
It's really interesting to see what those Neanderthals were eating and potentially hunting, and they would have had to have been very robust to deal with that.
Oh, absolutely. You know, it's a lifestyle that required incredible strength.
But there is something else when we look at these arm bones, because they're different side to side. They're asymmetrical.
Yeah, when you look at the arm bones, you can see really visually that the right is larger and more robust than the left.
So the question is, what were Neanderthals doing differently with their right arms compared with their left arms? George, can you help me out?
Well, there are a couple of things that we can try out that might offer some clues. Now, we've got a fine specimen of a hunter here. Now, Colin, he's wired up onto a machine. What are we hoping to show with this?
Well, what we're trying to do is test a theory that explains that asymmetry they were talking about. You need intensity and you need frequency to cause bone change. The prevailing theory is that when you spear thrust, that back arm, the right arm, provides the majority of the force, and the front is simply steering, somewhat like a snooker pool cue.
Okay.
And so what we're going to do is we're going to measure the muscle activity during spear thrusting. The key is that the muscles attach onto the bone and change their shape. It's one of the things that influences the bone structure.
Okay, so when our hunter here stabs prey, these electrodes here will be activated.
Exactly. Well, the muscles will be activated. It will measure the energy that it produces. What we're going to get him to do is to do some spearing activities to measure the activity of the muscles that might give us clues as to how the bones are being influenced.
Okay, so you have to be a really fierce hunter.
We want some serious intensity, because this thing is either your dinner or your death. So get in there, nice stance, and we're going to get 3 hard stabs. So go ahead. Nice. And again, and out. One more. One more time.
About that.
Excellent, excellent. Okay, perfect. You just have a seat over there. Ooh. Now, what we see here, exactly, is that you'd expect from the theory that the right has more activity than the left. And what we're seeing is exactly the opposite. This is the right, this is the left.
Wow.
Yeah, it's the
so
left
it's
is far more
completely the
active.
other way around.
Yeah, and the reason for that, we think, is that it's not simply like playing pool. It's much more that you have a full body flexing the hips shift, the shoulders shift, and your arms go right into the target. The ground reaction force comes back along the spear, and the muscles of the left arm are taking the majority of the load. And as a result, they're far more active, which is the opposite way for what you'd expect for explaining what you see on the skeleton over there.
So how come the asymmetrical arm bones if the right arm is actually not doing as much work as the left?
It's a wonderful question. Neanderthals live in a cold climate. They needed to stay warmer than just their physiology would allow for. So clothing might have been part of the equation. To produce a hide, to take something like this, a skin, and produce a hide that you can construct clothing out of, takes a great deal of processing. In fact,
it has to be scraped and cleaned and
You're completely right. It takes approximately 8 hours per hide of scraping. That's a great deal of scraping. So if you remember, you need intensity and you need frequency to cause bone change.
How many hides would you need for one suit?
Perfect question. You need 5 to 6, and each individual needs a new suit per year.
Right, that's a lot of scraping.
Absolutely.
John, you're going to be scraping now.
Yeah. So what we want you to do is grab a stone tool. This is a side scraper. These are the types of things that are found predominantly in Neanderthal stone tool assemblages. So go ahead and give it a scrape for us. Perfect. And if you keep doing that, I'm going to move over to here. Again, this is the right shoulder. This is the activity from the right shoulder, the one that's active. If this type of activity is intense enough and frequent enough to cause bone adaptation, then this could explain what we see.
And they would have been doing this for hours and hours and hours.
The explanation is that if one person was doing it for their family, they could remain busy for half a year of scraping. It might explain the right side dominance and the massive asymmetry you see in Neanderthals.
It's very clear. Alice, this might be the answer. It could be something as mundane as scraping hides all day.
I really love this idea. I love the fact that we think of Neanderthals as big game hunters, and yet here we are looking at them and saying, well, actually, what's really shaped their bones is not hunting, but making clothes.
Most people from outside Africa can trace up to 4% of their DNA back to Neanderthals.
What might that Neanderthal DNA mean for us today? What sort of effects might it be having in our genomes?
Well, it's very difficult to say, but I have some results from you two which can shed some light on it. So this is a gene on chromosome 16 called WFDC1, and it's controlling cell growth.
Yeah.
We don't know what difference it makes to have different copies of it.
So this is very early stages at the moment, but
Absolutely.
we're starting to understand the implications of having some Neanderthal genes in our genomes. And actually we do know something about Neanderthal genes which is very interesting, and that's that we know that at least some Neanderthals had red hair, and that's very useful for Victor. So, catching up with Victor again.
Hello.
This is great. So we've actually got hair colour.
What's great about working in this nature is that it gives you the ability to test out different looks, different hair and different skin color before you commit.
This is grounded in science. Okay, it's looking quite artistic, but there's science at the base of it. And also the skin colour, I see you've done really pale skin.
Yeah.
So this is somebody who lived in a northern climate.
Right, much like us.
It's really starting to come together.
Now, there's one question I want to ask is, can we tell how this individual died?
It's a great question, and usually we can't. But in this case, the skeleton gives us some really interesting clues. On the outside of your bones is a membrane, and you can see here where it's roughened, that membrane was laying down new bone at around the time that this individual died. And it's at the distal end of the tibia. It's also in the distal femora.
And the key thing about this is that it's on both sides and it's symmetrical. And actually that is pretty indicative of one particular type of disease. And it's called hypertrophic pulmonary osteoarthropathy. And it basically means...
Yeah, in English, please.
Okay, so it basically means you're laying down new bone, but you're doing it in such a way that we know that that's related to lung and sometimes heart disease. But it makes it very probable that this individual had either a bad lung infection or lung cancer.
Yeah. It's one of the very rare cases where we have a fossil where we can actually make some indication of the cause of death.
So from these few bones we started with, we've established that Neanderthals were strong, adaptable, and possibly had an emergent culture and budding language. They were well suited to their Ice Age home, and given they were such a successful species, they survived for 350,000 years. Yet when the crunch came, they may simply have been unlucky.
It is very sad that they're no longer with us, but we have been able to bring Lafarasi 1 back to life with the help of all of this scientific evidence and our amazing model makers.
We started with a composite skeleton based on Lafarasi 1 and other finds. And over 2 months, we've carefully been reconstructing him. With extraordinary attention to detail, the muscles were painstakingly added to rebuild his body. His face was recreated using forensic techniques. Then the skin and hair were added. Now he's finished, and he's here.
So should we go and have a look?
I can't wait.
Yeah.
This is so exciting. We have literally never seen this before. Under a sheet. Go on then, Victor. Wow.
Wow.
Oh my goodness.
Wow, his eyes sparkle.
He's really lifelike.
Yeah.
The nose is really prominent,
That is
isn't
just
it?
fantastic.
Still trying to get my head around the fact that this guy is in my ancestry and not that far back. John, what do you think?
Give me a break. You looked like twins.
Isn't he wonderful? I mean, this just looks like a living, breathing Neanderthal. I'm slightly freaked out by him, actually. I just think he's going to start moving.
That is unbelievable. It's uncanny. It's
John,
spooky.
what do you reckon?
You know, it's just got this sort of humanizing effect to put the flesh on, and it's the challenge is to make something that's different from us look different, when in fact the details point to great similarity.
Oh, I could just imagine him striding off. Colin, what do you reckon? Is he muscly enough?
Yeah, he's got to be, but it's really impressive, isn't it?
It's a case where focusing on bone doesn't give the whole picture.
Yeah. Victor, such a good job. He's absolutely brilliant.
Thank you.
Yeah.
The African savanna, keeping cool is crucial to survival. Many animals insulate themselves against the harmful exposure of the sun with a protective layer of hair. They rest at the hottest times of the day to avoid overheating. But that means they have less time to travel and hunt. If Homo erectus was out running in the heat of the day, what stopped them overheating? Could this be the time that our early ancestors lost their hair?
Well, I'm with Professor Peter Wheeler from John Moores University. Would Homo erectus have been hairy?
That's something we don't know. But what we can say is that there are good reasons to think that it would have been advantageous for Homo erectus not to have been hairy.
Tell me more, Peter.
Yes, we've got these two volunteers who are not too dissimilar in physique from what the Narukatomi boy might have looked like had he survived to be an adult. And they're identical twins, and they've trained to a similar level of fitness.
And we've had them standing under these heat lamps which emulate the African sun.
One of the advantages of retaining body hair is that it acts as a shield. It prevents a lot of the heat from the sun getting through to the body. And we've selected clothing which is similar in its thermal properties to that of the hair of living primates.
So in essence, we have a hairless hominid and a hairy one.
Yes. Now, although the surface of the hair does get very hot, in this case clothing, because it's insulating, most of it will be reflected and re-radiated back to the environment. It's the lighter colours that are the warmest areas. The surfaces on the naked skinned volunteer are hot. They are the skin being hot itself, therefore the heat is being absorbed directly by the body.
So when animals are standing still, their fur keeps them cool by reflecting heat away from the body. But John's bare skin is absorbing it, so he is getting hotter. Well, let's see how you fare when you start to run. We'll turn on fans to create a similar airflow to when you're actually running. We have a healthcare professional here. If you don't feel comfortable, you stop at any time, okay? Start running. Now, our volunteers have been really working up a sweat on these treadmills, so now I want to see who's keeping their cool.
How are you feeling? Oh, insulate from it? Tough? Yeah. And our naked skinned human? Okay. Well,
so
clearly,
he could keep going?
Yeah, he's obviously dissipating the heat load that his muscles are producing much more easily. And there are two distinct reasons why he's able to do this. The loss of his body hair means that heat can flow from his body more easily out into the environment. The second advantage is the loss of body hair makes sweating much more effective. When the sweat is secreted onto the skin surface. The increased airflow over the skin means that sweat is evaporated at a greater rate.
I'm worried about you guys. I think you should switch the machines off now, because I'm worried that you're about to have heat stroke. Now, hold up your shirt there. Look at that. Now, all that heat has been trapped inside. His core, his insides are really heating up. John on the left there is not nearly as hot underneath. So the advantages are quite clear.
The advantages are very clear, particularly during activity, either through long-distance persistence walking through the heat of the tropical day or short bursts of intense activity, such as our volunteers have done here.
There's one other problem with exposed skin in the sun, of course, that you would have to have dark skin protected by melanin. And what about hair on the head?
Well, one of the reasons we think hair is retained on the head is that it's actually shielding those areas of the body in a biped which are most exposed to the strongest fluxes of solar radiation when the sun is overhead.
And it protects your
it's
brain
shielding the brain
from overheating. Stephen, how do you feel?
It was really hard.
That was really hard.
Yeah. Good.
You could have kept going,
yeah.
I reckon.
Under the savannah sun, Narukatomi Boy could only run during the day if he could keep cool. Sweating is the most efficient way of losing heat. And to do that, he would have needed very little body hair.
This is really interesting, and I find it really intriguing that we could be looking at the point in our story where our ancestors lost their fur.
The rib cage is not as broad or wide or flared out as some of our earlier ancestors. And so what that means is that the space in between the pelvis and the diaphragm, where our guts live, seems to be a smaller volume. We have smaller guts.
Which suggests that he was eating better quality food.
The shorter the gut, the better quality of the food.
So meat could be an explanation for that, but there could be another explanation as well, why guts and teeth are getting smaller. It could have been that these guys were cooking their food.
It's controversial because until recently it was thought humans didn't control fire until around 400,000 years ago. But new chemical analysis techniques may have just put a match to all that.
Cooking with fire is a uniquely human behaviour. Today, Homo sapiens are the only species to do it, but that hasn't always been the case. In Williamstown, Massachusetts, Dr. Ann Skinner has been analysing tiny fragments of ancient animal bones that have been burned. They were found at a site used by Homo erectus, and Ann made an extraordinary discovery. Using a technique known as electron spin resonance, she can analyse changes in bone protein. These reveal what temperature the bones were burned at. Natural fires from the time of Homo erectus would have been grass fires that burn at 300 degrees Celsius. But man-made fires, created in a hearth, reach much higher temperatures.
So if I have bones that are heated above 300, and especially above 400 to give us a little leeway here, then I can be sure that they were not heated in a grass fire, and hence they have to have been heated in a fire constructed by hominids.
Anne used her technique to analyse burnt fragments of antelope bones found in Svartkran's cave in South Africa. This was a cave where Homo erectus remains had also been found. Remarkably, she found that the bones had burned at 350 degrees Celsius. Anne believes this shows they must have been burnt in a hearth.
I can show that these bones were burnt in a fire that must have been created and controlled at the cave, and that dates to somewhere between 1 and 1.5 million years, which is older than any other site that has ever been found.
Scientists believe that the only species to have the mental ability to use fire at this time was Homo erectus.
The idea that these entities had the ability to even conceive that they might control their environment, rather than just letting the environment control them. I mean, instead of seeing a burning bush and running in the other direction, to conceptually say, hey, we could use that. Even if we weren't cooking, we could use it to scare away the leopards. We could use it to keep warm. Just thinking that there's something that you could use in your environment takes more effort than you might think.
Anne's findings have rewritten the timeline on Homo erectus's ability to harness fire. Evolutionary biologist Dr. Rachel Carmody has studied the research. She believes that the early use of fire could even have accelerated their development.
This kind of work is really showing us that humans were controlling fire and were possibly using it for things like cooking very early on in human evolution.
Cooked food means a more varied, higher energy diet. This reduces the workload for the gut and leaves calories spare for the rest of the body. A fifth of the calories we consume are used to fuel our brains, and there's a theory that a switch to cooked food is one of the things that encouraged an increase in brain size.
What we see at this point in human evolution is the beginning of a trade-off, where gut size gets smaller, so you save energy by having a smaller gut. But humans seem to have been able to reallocate that saved energy toward fueling a larger brain.
So is there a link between a better diet and growing bigger brains?
I find this really intriguing and slightly unsettling because for me this is evolution turned on its head. Because we're saying that we are saving some energy somewhere, so that means we can grow a bit of ourselves bigger. George, what do you think?
Chimpanzee spends 47% of his time chewing and eating and processing food, whereas humans only spend 4.7%. So you've got all this extra time and energy to do something with it. Why not cooking?
When walking along, and we can see that we walk with a nice straight leg, and one of the really key bits of anatomy is up here. These are the abductor muscles on the outside of your hip joint, and they stop your hips swinging from side to side as you're walking. Robin, I think that's a chimp over your end, isn't it?
Yep.
Completely different gait, so that's very bent hip, bent knee.
Well, really what you can see in the chimpanzee is the strong flexure of the knee, bringing all the force of the body down behind the knee and in front of the foot. Now this is actually continually flexing the knee joint, and this is what makes that sort of walking so inefficient.
That looks very inefficient with this sort of rotating hip. It's very hard to do.
Well, one of the reasons is if you stand in this sort of posture, gravity's continuing to flex your knee, and your muscles in front of the thigh work harder and harder and harder to stop you bending more and more, and it becomes very tiring.
It's very tiring, and your knees start to shake.
And yes.
Oh, so it's much more efficient to actually straighten your legs. It's more efficient to stand that way, and it's more efficient to walk this way as well.
Yeah.
And so who's this in the middle then?
That's a Lucy.
So this is how Lucy would have walked.
I would say a little bit more straight leg than that too. I think that's
even more straight.
Even more straight leg than that.
There's a slight swing on the hips, isn't there? There's a little...
Yes, you've got basically a broader hip than we would have had.
I think, again, we have to emphasise the fact that, chimpanzees are not our ancestors, and we're using them as a comparison. But it seems that what we've got here in Australopithecus afarensis is something which is almost halfway between a very chimpanzee-like way of walking and a modern human way of walking. Well, looking at the anatomy of Lucy's feet, knees and pelvis, it suggests she's spending lots of time walking on the ground. But some new research has been looking at another bit of her anatomy, her hands, and this may shed some light on how much she was using them for climbing.
It may seem surprising, but the way we use our hands in climbing a tree or gripping a tool is recorded in our wrist bones. Powell Cotton House in southern England is one of the most important primate study centres in the world. Our ancient ancestors spent more time in the trees than we do. But new research conducted here is beginning to shed light on when they decided to trade life in the trees for life on the ground. Paleoanthropologist Professor Gabrielle Macho has been studying the wrist bones of modern chimpanzees and humans and comparing them with wrist bones from Lucy's species, Australopithecus afarensis.
We have been looking at the capitate. It's the biggest bone of the wrist, and it's sitting right in the middle here, and it's along the main load transfer from the middle finger to the upper arm.
Gabrielle has been putting capitate bones into a CT scanner to reveal the internal structure of trabecular bone.
In a little bone like this, you get a very complex arrangement of trabecular bone. And it's no coincidence, it's also called the spongy bone.
Having made CT scans of capitate bones, Gabrielle applied the same computer modelling that aircraft manufacturers use to analyse stress in the wings of aeroplanes. This showed where the spongy bone had been reinforced to cope with the forces applied to them.
The difference between the two bones is quite striking. In the chimpanzee, you see the red loads travel towards the left side, and this is the side where you have your little finger. In modern humans, see it quite nicely, it is traveling towards the thumb side.
So chimps show evidence of reinforcement on the little finger side of this bone, because that is where the loading is greatest when they climb trees. But in humans, who use their thumbs far more, the loading is on the thumb side of the bone. This technique could reveal how much time ancient species spent in the trees. Next, Gabrielle looked at capitates from Australopithecus afarensis, the same species as Lucy. She also analysed capitates from another slightly older species, Australopithecus anamensis. Her findings suggest that a dramatic change was taking place.
The older one, Australopithecus anamensis, behaves more like a chimpanzee. So you have the load transfer towards the little finger, and this is what you expect if you're moving up a tree, if you're climbing, whereas the later Australopithecus afarensis has more of a human-like pattern. So it definitely used its thumb much more regularly than the older specimens, and it is maybe some indications that they have largely abandoned an arboreal lifestyle, so they have come to the ground.
Our ancient ancestors choose to walk upright. The forests were retreating, but out on the savannah, they were easy prey. But walking meant they could travel further to find food, and it freed up their hands. Walking on two legs clearly has advantages, but it comes at a price, and it's one we are still paying today.
Well, over here we have Professor Karen Rosenberg from the University of Delaware, and she's been studying this part of Lucy's anatomy very carefully. So this is a modern human pelvis, and it's a completely different shape from the chimpanzee.
Completely different, and it's completely different because of the way that we walk. As bipeds, we've had to modify our pelvis completely in order to walk on two legs, which a chimpanzee doesn't do.
I mean, this is like a blade. I mean, in fact, we do call this the iliac blade,
Yes,
don't we?
exactly.
And in us, it's formed a kind of basin shape.
Right.
It's a completely different shape.
Completely different, and the birth canal is completely different as well. In humans, the birth canal, which is here, is wide at the top, and then long at the midplane in the middle, and then approximately round at the outlet. And chimpanzees are long in all dimensions, so it's quite a different shape.
So do chimpanzees have any problems giving birth?
Apparently not. Apparently they have a pretty easy time. The baby's head is much smaller than the birth canal, and it seems to go through in a pretty straightforward way without a lot of difficulty.
So do you think that the changes to the human pelvis that have come about because of this adaptation to walking on two legs have had a knock-on effect for childbirth?
Huge effect for childbirth, and not just the modifications for locomotion, but it's because we give birth to babies with large brains.
Yeah, that's a bad bit of design, isn't it?
It is a very bad design.
Okay, so babies with big brains would have come along a bit later,
Yes, much later.
after Lucy's kind. But over here, we've got reconstructed Lucy's pelvis, because I think it's very useful to be able to see the pelvis in the round with the sacrum at the back as well. Now, first of all, it's very, very tiny, but I think if I put it in the middle there, I mean, I think that looks much more like a modern human pelvis than it does like a chimpanzee. In fact, it looks almost nothing like a chimpanzee pelvis.
Absolutely. The modifications that happened because we walk on two legs had taken place, obviously, by the time of Lucy, and so the pelvis looks much more similar to a modern human, but it doesn't look exactly like a modern human. And that's because the birth canal didn't have to give birth to a large brain baby.
So do you think Lucy would have still been able to give birth relatively easily then?
Relatively easily, but differently than in a chimpanzee.
So how have you been able to work that out?
Well,
and how differently?
Well, quite differently. So if we look at the way that modern humans give birth...
So this is a newborn baby,
this is
by the way.
a model of a newborn baby. In modern humans, the fit between the baby's head and the baby's shoulders And the birth canal is quite tight, as lots of people know from personal experience.
Yes, I know it from personal experience.
So the baby's head typically enters the birth canal facing to the side, like this.
Yeah.
But then it usually gets stuck, and so it usually turns, rotates 90 degrees, and emerges like this, so that the back of the baby's head is facing to the front of the mother's body. So the mother can't easily reach down and clear the baby's breathing passage or move the umbilical cord if it's around the neck. Those are things that in other animals the mother can do for herself, but it's more difficult for humans to do. So humans are typically, almost always, born with another person helping.
So with Lucy's pelvis then, why do you think it would have been difficult to get a baby out through Lucy's pelvis? Because her babies would have had much smaller heads than ours.
Yes, but Lucy's pelvis and Lucy's birth canal in particular is different from both modern humans and a chimpanzee. It's like a modern human in that it's wide from side to side, but then it has that shape all the way through.
So her baby wouldn't have twisted around in the same way?
Exactly, and not only didn't need to turn and twist, it probably couldn't turn and twist.
So this is really interesting. It means that in order to stand and walk upright on two legs, Lucy was paying a price. She was paying a price, and that it made childbirth more difficult.
Absolutely.
Many people still think of the Neanderthals as a simple-minded, thuggish people, but recent, quite often unexpected discoveries are forcing us to confront that perception. Archaeologist Clive Finlayson and his team are convinced that this simplistic impression of Neanderthals is wrong.
We've been working in these caves in Gibraltar now for over 25 years. We have dates in these caves now with Neanderthals as recently as 32,000 years ago. That would make this the last site where Neanderthals lived.
This, the last known refuge of a lost tribe of Neanderthals, has produced thousands of bones and artifacts.
It presents us with almost a total picture of Neanderthal life in this part of the world. Families were living here, sleeping here, and going out to hunt and forage from here. In my view, the stereotype of the ape-like Neanderthal, I think, is changing. People are realizing, even anatomically, that there may be physical differences between our ancestors and them, but they're not as huge as we thought once upon a time. What is really changing our view is the cultural evidence, the evidence of the abilities that we thought only we had and caused our expansion across the globe. And we're beginning to realize that Neanderthals were not that different.
In the past, experts suggested that Neanderthals were incapable of planning, of thinking 2 or 3 steps ahead.
That's not true at all. These people knew their environment very well, they knew what they had here, and they exploited it very well. And that's probably the key to the success and their survival for such a long time.
The Neanderthals were not only an immensely successful European species, but we're starting to realise that they were cultured in a way that we'd thought was the sole preserve of modern humans. The clues are hidden amongst the many bird bones buried in these caves.
More and more we've found that the evidence is in the form of cut marks on the bones, and what we realised was that a lot of the marks were on the wing bones of these birds.
Using stone tools and dead birds found on the shoreline, Clive's team have been exploring what the Neanderthals might have been doing.
If you dissect the wing bone of a vulture or an eagle, what you find is a bone and a tendon and the feathers attached to the skin. There's no meat because you have to be lightweight to be able to saw. So if you're cutting these wing bones in birds of prey, it has to be something to do with feathers and certainly has nothing to do with meat or food. In parallel, we realized that a lot of the species of bird of prey being brought in were birds of prey with dark feathers. And we showed that there seemed to be a discrimination in terms of color. Neanderthals preferred black for some reason. The conclusion that we came to after a lot of analysis is that they were getting the feathers for ornamentation, to wear them in some way. Many cultures across the globe, historically and today, use bird feathers. North American Indians, for example. Because of this close relationship that they had with birds, we decided to call them the bird people of Europe.
Deeper in these caves, the team have found evidence suggesting that these bird people had the capacity for abstract thought, something else which was believed to be exclusive to modern humans.
We have found this incredible engraving on the rock made by Neanderthals, and it's the only one that is known today, anywhere. It took us 2 years of intensive study, and we came to the conclusion that it took them at least 2 hours to do because we replicated the whole procedure. So it wasn't a doodle. They actually thought about it. And it wasn't marks done for butchery, for example, if you're cutting through skin. We tried to replicate that with skin and the lines go all over the place. This was something that wasn't functional. It was sending a message to somebody, and it was done very, very deliberately, and it took a long time.
This is not mere survival. This looks like art.
It's the next step, if you like, the smoking gun in terms of Neanderthal behavior.
So contrary to the popular perception of them, we're now realising that Neanderthals exhibited many aspects of what we call modern human behaviour. Janet Kelso, a colleague of Santa Parvo at the Max Planck Institute, has been studying the history of humans through comparative genetics.
In terms of diversity in the Neanderthal population, that was much lower than what we see in present-day populations. So if you look around this tram carriage, there's more diversity in this tram carriage, perhaps, than there was in the population of Neanderthals that we know about. We think that that's probably because they were living in rather small populations.
When we got the first really high-quality Neanderthal genome, one surprise was where the two versions of the genome that this individual had inherited from its mother and its father had no differences between them. And this obviously suggests that the mother and father of this individual were closely related. They are on a level of half-siblings or double first cousins. We don't know if this is typical of Neanderthal societies at that time or if it's something special that happened in this cave at this point in time.
What's certain is that low genetic diversity is not good for a population.
It is known that populations that are more interbred, that have less diversity, have less ability to respond to, say, a new pathogen or a changing environment. So this diversity kind of provides a buffer for the environment, and if the Neanderthals were less diverse, then it's quite possible that that may have contributed to why they died out.
But it turns out that Neanderthals may not have died out completely after all. Genetic research can tell us a great deal about who we are and where we come from, and it is completely reshaping our idea of what it is to be a modern human. While our Homo sapiens ancestors were sharing the planet with the various lost tribes, there was of course the chance that they might have interbred with them. This meant that there was a possibility, however unlikely it seems, that there might be a remnant of some archaic DNA hanging around in the genomes of present-day humans. So the geneticists in Leipzig went digging for it.
What we wanted to look at was whether there was interbreeding from Neanderthals into modern humans, and our expectation was that there was none. And when we got the first result that suggested that there had been interbreeding, we were very skeptical, all of us.
Comparing modern human DNA to the detailed Neanderthal genome seemed to suggest some sharing of genes.
We all kind of spent a lot of time looking at the data, trying to figure out how this could be an error.
But the evidence was there. Certain modern human genomes from different parts of the world contained sections that matched the Neanderthal DNA.
So what we're looking at here is a region of chromosome 4. At the top, we have 2 Neanderthals, and then we have a Denisovan, and then here we have Asian individuals, European individuals, South American individuals, Papuans, Australians, and then a group of Africans. And if you look down, you can see that at most positions, everyone is very similar. And that's because we're very closely related, right? Modern humans and Neanderthals are not that different from one another, which makes it really hard to work out where are the interesting differences. And so what we do is instead we mask out, we remove all the sites where everyone is the same. And we only look at the sites where individuals differ from the reference genome. And so what you see here now is the Neanderthals and the Denisovan carry a difference from the modern human reference at this position, and here, and there, and there. And some of those differences are shared by a number of populations, including the African individuals. And some of those differences are shared just by a few individuals. So here, and there, and there. When we went through the genomes of Africans and of Europeans and of Asians and counted how many DNA bases in each of the genomes matched the Neanderthal genome, we saw very consistently that all the groups outside of Africa shared more Neanderthal DNA than the groups inside of Africa.
Once upon a time, we shared this planet with many other species of human. To us today, it would seem like a strange, fantastical world, only it was real. For our new series, Human, we wanted to bring some of these prehistoric humans to life, and we did it through a high-tech process called photogrammetry. We had to select real-life models and capture them from all angles with cameras, an obscene number of cameras, 154. Then we stitched all those photos together to create a 3D model. Finally, we could manipulate the model with CGI and create our ancient humans. We used the most up-to-date information to create these long extinct beings. Imagine being famous for standing upright on 2 legs. Well, that's the claim to glory of Homo erectus, Latin for upright human. Only embarrassingly, they weren't the first ones to do it. Bipedalism actually evolved earlier, like millions of years earlier. Only to start with, it was a combination. They were sometimes walking upright, and other times they were still up in the trees. So what makes Homo erectus so special? Well, they were the first human species to leave Africa and possibly the first to control fire. And to be fair, as much as they weren't the first species to stand upright, it's possible that they were the first species of human to walk entirely upright and not be in the trees at all. In the body shape of Homo erectus, we can see similarities to our own. But they also had a large but short rib cage, rather than the longer, flatter chest of modern humans, making them appear much stockier. And some of the most interesting differences come in the head. So this is a replica, a copy of a Homo erectus that lived about 1.8 million years ago. And you can see that brow ridge is not something you would see on someone today. And see the face, see how it juts outwards in a way that ours doesn't tend to. You can especially see it around here. And you'll notice in our render, no chin. Now, this lack of chin might seem really unusual to us, but actually, all the other species, they're the chinless majority. We're the oddity, actually. As for why we have this chin, well, the jury's out. It's kind of a mystery. People have put forward all kinds of suggestions, including speech, chewing, even sexual selection. But truthfully, we don't know. Now you might be thinking, what about hair? Why is our Homo erectus hairless? Well, the fact of the matter is, we have no idea how much hair they had or how they might have styled it. There's nothing in the fossil record that tells us. So with all these models, we've gone with a hairless look. Anyway, back to erectus. You might be wondering what led to their extinction. Some scientists believe that the very last Homo erectus met their demise because of climate change, which shifted the environment from woodland to more dangerous rainforest. But I would suggest that we're asking the wrong question. They gave rise to many other species, including eventually us. And they stuck around for 2 million years. We've only been around for 300,000 years. So honestly, I think they did just fine. I mean, we should be so lucky. I want to talk about, hands down, the most unexpected human species to ever be discovered. It sent shockwaves through the scientific community. And amazingly, this species came to about this tall. Now, you might not be familiar with Homo floresiensis, but you're probably familiar with the nickname. These people were so fantastical that we named them after Lord of the Rings, hobbits. And their discovery was a fascinating tale in of itself. In 2003, archaeologists discovered a skeleton on the island of Flores in Indonesia that stood at about 106 centimeters or 3 feet 6 inches tall. They initially believed this belonged to a modern human child, but upon further investigation, they realized that the skull contained fully developed and erupted wisdom teeth. So many argued loudly that it was a Homo sapiens adult whose smallness was actually just a result of some kind of pathology. But they found others, hundreds of thousands of years apart. Scientists came to the conclusion that Bilbo Baggins, or in our case, Mrs. Bilbo Baggins here, was in fact an entirely separate species of archaic human. However, it was so unbelievable to so many scientists, the idea of a small-statured human with a small brain who was still capable of making stone tools. Precisely when they originated is unclear, but we know that some of the remains on the island of Flores in Indonesia are at least 700,000 years old. And these tiny humans shared the island with giant marabou storks that were taller than me, giant rats, and Komodo dragons. So apparently some of the creatures on this island were kind of huge, just not them. And it's the remarkable size of these hobbits that's continued to fascinate scientists. Some scientists think that Homo floresiensis is an offshoot of Homo erectus who somehow landed on this secluded island, and they underwent something which we call island dwarfism, which is when large animals get small and, strangely, small animals get big. It's just a process that we know happens on islands. However, other scientists think that Homo floresiensis evolved from a far older and smaller species that predates Homo erectus. But there's no evidence of any earlier hominins before Homo erectus leaving Africa. So scientists disagree. Beyond their stature, these humans had wider hips proportionally compared to our narrower bodies, and a much smaller skull and brain case, protecting a brain that was roughly a third of the size of ours. In fact, their brains were closer in size to an adult chimpanzee. I mean, look at the difference. They're absolutely tiny. Homo floresiensis became extinct around 50,000 years ago, around the same time that Homo sapiens arrived on Flores, and also during a period of major volcanic activity on the island. Much like their unusual height, the last days of this species remain a mystery. If I was to ask you to conjure up in your mind the image of a Neanderthal, you might imagine a knuckle-dragging, brutish creature. And after years of anti-Neanderthal propaganda, you'd kind of be forgiven. But how convenient is it that we have portrayed our closest relative in this light, especially when they're not around to defend themselves? Well, it turns out the truth is far more interesting. Now, Neanderthals show up about 130,000 years before us, Homo sapiens, and evolved outside of Africa, in Europe or Asia, spreading all the way from Wales to the mountains of Siberia. An interesting question in bringing a Neanderthal to life is skin color. Now, this would probably have varied Neanderthal to Neanderthal, but DNA samples of Neanderthal specimens from modern Europe found that those individuals probably had pale skin and some possibly even red hair. It seems that some Neanderthals might have adapted to the European environment, which is a higher latitude and therefore you have less sunlight. And lighter skin means that you can produce more vitamin D even if you have less sunlight. So essentially, before Neanderthals, there was no need for lighter skin. And that's why we didn't have white people until then, because they hadn't been invented yet. Physically, you can see that Neanderthals looked markedly different to modern humans. They were stockier, with shorter arms and legs and a more muscular body. You can see we enlarged the nose of our model. This is because Neanderthals adapted to their colder environment and needed a wider nose to regulate the cold, dry Ice Age air. As for the skull, well, their brain size was similar to ours. So what does that tell us about Neanderthal smarts? Obviously, they definitely didn't achieve as much as Homo sapiens. They didn't write or paint the Mona Lisa, or for that matter, create catastrophic global weather conditions. But they were definitely smarter than we used to think. They crafted tools, cooked with fire, decorated objects that may have been used as jewelry, and some may have even buried their dead. And finally, they're receiving some posthumous, decent PR. Visualizing these species up close reminds us of a stark fact. It was only 300,000 years ago that at least 6 species of human occupied this planet. Folks, we were not alone. And while other species interbred with our own, only we, Homo sapiens, remain. Surviving on planet Earth has long been an arduous challenge, and 99.9% of species that have ever lived are now extinct. And these lost ancestors and relatives are a reminder that we Homo sapiens shouldn't forget just how fragile life on this planet can be.
How can we tell the story of our species, Homo sapiens, over 300,000 years across 7 continents? Well, let's try doing it using 6 objects. Because these objects tell a tale that spans all the way back to the distant past. First off, a skull that transformed our understanding of how and when we came into existence. Here's a question we should all probably know the answer to. When did our species begin? Like, how old are we? Well, until recently, we got that completely wrong. For a long time, our species, Homo sapiens, were thought to have emerged about 200,000 years ago, probably in East Africa. But then research conducted at one site warped our understanding completely. Back in the 60s, in a remote cave in Morocco, a mining operation stumbled across a fossilized skull. Soon, the site was full of archaeologists, and over the years, they discovered human remains that were frankly kind of weird. This is a replica of Jebel Irhoud 1, which is one of the fossils that was found in that Moroccan cave. This skull was so confusing for archaeologists because it has a mishmash of features. So if you look at this brow ridge here, that protrudes so much, you would just not find that on a Homo sapiens living today. That is very old. It's more reminiscent of some of the older species, like Neanderthals, for example. And yeah, the face, that's pretty gracile. It's very delicate, very similar to our own. It's kind of all tucked in underneath the brain case. So how did this really strange mix fit into the human tree? It was a complete mystery. Some people thought perhaps it was an African Neanderthal. Others thought it was just some strange thing that was happening in Morocco and had nothing to do with us. So this skull that is a strange blend of old and new is actually around 300,000 years old and a Homo sapiens. So it pushes back the age of our species by about 100,000 years. Turns out, thanks to this discovery, we're a lot older than we thought we were. This fossil was also found in Morocco, remember? And we used to think our origins were in East Africa, and so it points to a much more complex, continent-wide process that led to the beginning of our species. Next, a mysterious rock formation that reveals the awakening of human minds. If you were to meet an early Homo sapiens, you might recognize them. They might look like us, but did they think like us? Well, there's a cave in the Zedilo Hills of Botswana that contains a clue.
The rocks were formed in a way which looks like the body and the head of a snake. Now, the overall shape is natural, but there is nothing natural about the detail. The rock has over 300 man-made indentations all over, and those indentations end up looking like scales. So were the people in the cave trying to make the rock look even more like a snake? Archaeologists also found the remnants of prehistoric tools that were burnt or intentionally smashed. Why would you go to the trouble of making a tool only to damage it? Well, some of the archaeologists that have worked on this material have suggested that it's ritualistic destruction. Could this be an offering? All of this points towards a kind of abstract thought. This cave paints a picture of these people that were able to see and think beyond what was tangibly in front of them. Now, that is something that we thought only happened quite recently, but this site is dated to about 70,000 years ago. And we can't be 100% sure how they were thinking and about their belief system, but it's possible that they were asking for very similar things to what we would ask for: health, children, food. And it's remarkable to think that a cave like that shows us some of the beginnings of the behaviors which we, you and I, and every single person on the planet know so well. Christmas, Eid, birthdays, Glastonbury. We are obsessed with ritual, and this cave shows us that we have been for a very, very long time. Now, a piece of technology that helped humans conquer new environments. The rainforest, dynamic, dangerous, and full of predators. You would think it would be a bad place for squishy bipedal apes like us. And it does seem like all the other species of human avoided the rainforest, and yet we took it on by adapting our technology so that we could thrive there. Now, when I say technology, be honest, you're imagining weapons, bows, arrows, spears, and that's a huge part of the story. But deep within the Sri Lankan rainforest, we also see something else. The teeth of monkeys who lived in the canopies of this rainforest, which had been sharpened and modified, perhaps to puncture materials like animal hides. This might have allowed humans to string together plant and animal materials, perhaps creating things like clothes, bags, shelter. And all of this would have been fundamental to living in the challenging environment that is a rainforest, where clothes could protect humans from insect-borne diseases, shelter would keep them safe from the rain, and bags could be created to carry equipment over long distances. You can imagine grandparents sitting there with their grandchildren, teaching them how to use these tools, teaching them how to perfect the techniques. They show us something amazing about our species, how we adapted technology and passed it on so that we could take on environments once thought to be impenetrable. Next, some fossils that show we were a lot more intimate with other species of human than we once thought. Most of you watching this have about 2% Neanderthal DNA, which basically means that one of your great, going back a lot of great grandparents got busy with a Neanderthal. In the early 2000s, these fossils were discovered in a Worsley cave in Romania. Now, if you look at these replicas, they do clearly look Homo sapiens. But if you look really closely, there are some features on them which are kind of mysterious. The large molars, and notice the forehead. It recedes. Those features are Neanderthal. This led the team to wonder if this was evidence of Neanderthals and Homo sapiens interbreeding. Thanks to a revolution in ancient DNA technology, we now know that Neanderthals and Homo sapiens did interbreed, and that one of those Awase fossils was, in fact, definitely a hybrid. They had a Neanderthal relative about 4 to 6 generations earlier. This Neanderthal genetic legacy in us is really interesting, not just because it tells us something about the private lives of our ancestors, but because it tells us something about our DNA today. See, that Neanderthal DNA within us is associated with both positive and negative things. On the plus side, the Neanderthal DNA is associated with things like immunities and even increased fertility. And on the negative, it's associated with things like increased severity of COVID. The Neanderthals have died out, but for better or worse, a part of them still lives on within us.
Now onto a remarkable prehistoric weapon that helped humanity triumph in a whole new continent.
Imagine being the first humans to set foot in the Americas. No other species of human had, and so it was a landmass that was untouched by human activity, including hunting. So imagine the creatures you would have encountered there. Mammoths, giant bison, mastodons. So isn't it amazing that these prehistoric humans looked at these animals and thought, yum. This is a Clovis spearhead. These artifacts are around 13,000 years old, and they are extraordinarily well crafted. Long and narrow, thinning towards the end with sharp edges, allowing them to pierce the hides of enormous animals. But there's another version of the Clovis spearhead that is mysterious, striking, and beautiful. This is a spearhead made of crystal quartz. Quartz crystal is beautiful to look at, but vulnerable to shattering. So if it wasn't used as a weapon, what was it used for? Maybe it was ceremonial. We also know that a boy from this period was buried with about 100 Clovis-like tools, again pointing to this idea that this technology had deep cultural meaning.
Finally, a small written document that exemplifies the power and scale of human ambition.
What if I was to tell you that the first of the Great Pyramids of Giza, one of the most astonishing achievements in human history, was built thanks in part to a boring spreadsheet. Day 24, Inspector Mera spends the day with his file hauling stones. Day 25, Inspector Mera spends the day with his team hauling stones. Riveting read. So how did this lead to that? It was here on the Red Sea coast that archaeologists discovered fragments of a text dating back over 4,500 years. This, thought to be the world's oldest known papyrus, is the Diary of Mera, a time capsule for the reign of the pharaoh Khufu. Khufu is best known for overseeing the construction of the first of the Great Pyramids of Giza. And Mera, the author of this diary, was an inspector, an official involved in the transportation of things like limestone and food supplies, and his journal describes just that. It is a bit amusing that one of humanity's oldest known texts is essentially a spreadsheet. A dull list of goods and transportation details, the kind of thing that you would hate to be given at work. But it's the kind of thing that you need to actually build the pyramids. You see, humanity by this point were much more numerous, and writing allowed us to communicate with each other and organize these huge numbers of people. And maybe there's some comfort in the Diary of Mera. It's nice to realize that boring spreadsheets are not a uniquely modern thing. So hopefully these 6 objects give you a sense of our 300,000-year-old story. But if you want another object, just look in the mirror, because you are a byproduct of that journey. Everyone's like, oh, it's our bigger brains. And I'm like, yeah, absolutely, it's part of the story. But like, whales could be making this show if it was just that. I'm Ella Al-Shamahi. I'm a paleoanthropologist, an evolutionary biologist, and I'm the presenter of Human. We were not destined for greatness. And I think that shocks a lot of people. A lot of people think that we were the new kid on the block. As soon as Homo sapiens turned up, it was game over for all the other species. And let me tell you, it was not game over for all the other species. The evidence kind of alludes to potential showdowns with the other species, potential, it's still very controversial, and us not necessarily succeeding. Like, for example, around the same time, there was one cave that was filled with Homo sapiens, and there was another cave that was filled with Neanderthals. That basically means they were both living there at the same time. And it looks like only the Neanderthals continued living there. We quite likely became locally extinct. It's not a story of a species that turns up and is immediately brilliant. We had to evolve quite a bit. And I think we had a bit of luck on our side. You know that image of one species leading to another species, leading to another species? I have a problem with that for two reasons. One is obviously, where are the women? The second problem I have with that image is that it gives the impression that evolution is just really linear. So one species dies out, gives rise to another species, etc., etc. And we now know that that is just not the case. Human evolution is so much more complicated, that there were loads of us living on the planet at the same time. Different groups were interbreeding. We actually only know the tip of the iceberg of how many human species are out there. Since I've been a paleoanthropologist, we have discovered so many more species. Like, our family tree got a lot bigger in the last few years. And so it's funny that that image that is so ingrained in people's minds when they think of human evolution is just actually quite inaccurate. Epic question. I'd marry the Neanderthal. This is kind of controversial, but I would probably avoid Homo erectus. They were kind of earlier, and therefore I'm assuming a bit more primitive, and I don't know how much I'd trust them. This is the one I'd make out with. It's not PG-13, what I was about to say. This is Homo floresiensis, who a lot of us nickname the Hobbit after Lord of the Rings because they're basically about 1 meter tall. It's like the brain size of a chimpanzee. And yet it was bipedal, so standing upright on two legs, making stone tools. It had the behavior of a human and yet is this size. And this is just, in my opinion, the most bizarre find. I just want to know them. In a makeout session, you'd have a certain amount of time where you could chat. Just tell me about yourself. I suddenly realised that it looks like a kink. They're never going to be able to include this. When people think about our large brains, they think that the size of the brain is what makes us brilliant. Truthfully, Neanderthals had very similar sized brains to us. Elephants, whales, they have big brains too, and yet they're not watching this series. It's about the organisation, in my opinion, of that brain. We seem to have a capacity to copy each other and learn from each other. And also, we had the advantage of many, many people. Look, all of these are theories, right? There was a lot of Homo sapiens compared to, well, for example, the Neanderthals. That means you have a bigger source of people inventing, copying, perfecting the technology. If you have 50 people in your group, you've all got to get really, really good at everything. Hunting, gathering, etc., because you've all got to work really, really hard to survive. If there's 500 of you in your group, suddenly you can start specializing. All of those people inventing, perfecting, and tinkering. Everyone's like, oh, it's our bigger brains. And I'm like, yeah, absolutely, it's part of the story. But like, whales could be making this show if it was just that. I don't think we fully understand how hard life was. The Neanderthals were contending with some really, really cold climates. I would really struggle with that. Life as any kind of human before agriculture was very, very difficult. That's why I always laugh at people that talk about the paleo diet, because I'm like, they were all dead by my age. The Neanderthals, towards the end of their time, were just kind of riddled with diseases because of inbreeding. So I think if you had to be a Neanderthal, you'd probably want to be an earlier Neanderthal, because, yeah, life got pretty bleak. I am quite moved by certain things about the other species. I have seen up close Neanderthal handprints. I can't even say that without getting goosebumps. That image that we have of the Neanderthal, that kind of like, I don't know, knuckle-dragging ape man. You don't imagine them putting their hands in red paint or red ochre to create these impressions. In that same cave, there were kiddie handprints. So the kids of these Neanderthals were also learning it. And that, I think, is something that we relate to so much. Like, what other species walks up to a wall and thinks, I want to leave a mark? It's bonkers. Like, that is something that is so us. I've been so lucky. Oh, I was really, really excited by the island of Socotra, which they describe as like the most alien-looking place on Earth. It's full of like species that exist there and nowhere else. The thing that I found really, really fascinating about that place was that lots of people on the island have roots that are very, very linked to caves. And we turned up to this one place where people literally lived in front of the caves that they were born in. And they actually still retreat to them during the monsoon. You just think, oh my God, if people were living in those caves like 20 years ago, that means there's probably really, really good archaeology in those caves. So I would say Socotra, just in terms of the science of it, just the beauty of it, and just how alien it looked. So I will say I love caves. I really, really love caves. Like for me, they're like a bit of a spiritual experience. I appreciate it makes me sound like an idiot, but anyway. What are any of us looking for in a home, right? You want somewhere which is safe, protected from the elements. With caves, they come in all shapes and sizes. Oh, and the one thing you actually do want if you're gonna get a cave is if it's like kind of high up and it gives you a good vantage point on the landscape, because then you can be like, oh, you know, that enemy's coming, or, you know, Mary's coming. Good views, good views. You know, just what you're looking for in a flat in London. In terms of things inside that cave, it'd be super helpful if there was like some running water. You want to be able to set a fire and not die from the smoke. So you want there to be good aeration. You also sometimes bury your dead there. Just don't go too far. Like, living and cooking in one place without turning it into a cemetery as well is the way I'd like to live personally. I can't always admit to some of them, which is bluntly kind of annoying because it would give me some serious street cred. The ones that I can like admit to, I went to the island of Socotra, which was between Yemen and Somalia, and we got there via a cement cargo ship and just sailed through pirate waters for a few days. And it was really a ship that was not fit for purpose, but it was the safest of options. Properly bonkers, that expedition. This series, I slept in a rat's nest. No joke, an actual rat's nest. They would not leave me alone all night. I got to the point where I was like, lads, you can be here. I just need you to be quiet because like in 4 hours, I've got to be on camera. I got infested with fleas in this series. That was the whole team we came down with fleas, only because I'm the presenter. There's an issue with continuity. So basically there were these trousers that were clearly infested with fleas and I like had all these bites on me and they were like, you're gonna have to be in it for a few hours longer. So not Lara Croft, more just like me and all the insects and animals.
There's a scandal in your family tree. It's a scandal that's in a lot of our family trees. Some of our ancestors had sex with Neanderthals. I'm Ella Al-Shamahi and here's everything you got wrong about Neanderthals. Let's be honest, if somebody calls you a Neanderthal, they're not being nice, they are probably insulting you. There are all these stereotypes about Neanderthals, right? That they're knuckle-dragging ape men, that they're brutish, that they would just hit you over the head with a massive club. But actually, we now know Neanderthals were incredibly intelligent. They even had bits of symbolism in their culture. There's this one incredible site where they have these stalagmites, stalactites in these circles. It's kind of mysterious, but you can imagine it was potentially some kind of cultural meaning. They had impressive stone tools. In fact, some of their technology we stole off them. They walked upright as you or I. They liked to decorate themselves, kind of liked iridescent feathers, the kind of feathers that are shiny. You can imagine they were maybe beautifying themselves in these incredible feather headdresses and clothes. I get that. Some of us today are wearing jewelry because we also want to look nice. Some of our ancestors had sex with Neanderthals. It's just kind of nice to know that there are some skeletons in the family closet that are quite scandalous. It's kind of wild to think about. Today, we're the only species left. We're not going to interbreed with anyone other than ourselves. And yet for the ancestors, they had that choice. Our ancestors and the Neanderthals were close enough that they were able to have children. So that means that you have Neanderthal DNA in you. If I was to guess, most of you have about 2% Neanderthal DNA. Some of you don't have any at all, but most of you have it. There is a good chance that the Neanderthal DNA in us has helped us survive and be successful. When we interbred with them, we were entering into environments that we were not used to. And we would have been facing pathogens, diseases that were quite alien to us. And yet these Neanderthals had spent hundreds of thousands of years adapting to their environment. It's really likely that we picked up immunities from them, but it's also likely that we picked up some technologies from them, or we just picked up knowledge from them. Their legacy is all around us. A lot of people ask why the Neanderthals went extinct. That's a really fair question that we don't actually fully know the answer to. The Neanderthals were probably around a lot longer than we've been around. Neanderthals existed for about 400,000 years, and we've existed for about 300,000 years. We would have to be around for quite a few more years before we're as successful as they were in terms of just how long we've been on this planet. Neanderthals were not the only species of human that we shared the planet with. We were originally really kind of an African species. You had the Neanderthals in Asia and Europe. You had the Denisovans, who were further into Asia. You had Homo floresiensis, affectionately nicknamed the Hobbit after the Lord of the Rings characters because they were about 1 meter tall. When I think about that world, it kind of captures my imagination because we have nothing to compare that to. Our closest living relatives are like the chimpanzees. We don't look into their eyes and see ourselves, whereas if we looked into the eyes of, let's say, this French Neanderthal, you can't wonder how much would we be able to communicate. We know we made love with them. Did we potentially make war with them? There are so many unanswered questions because it is so outside of our reality today to think that we weren't the only ones. Like, this is quite literally the only time in our history that we're the only species of human to wander this planet. The biggest misconception that people have about our species, Homo sapiens, is that we were amazing from the very beginning. And it's because we're the only ones left, right? So we're looking around going, all right, well, we made it and the others didn't. And that is a huge thing that our series really delves into. I would call it a revisionist history of our species. Many of those other species were much better adapted to their environments than we were. So then the question is, how did we make it when they didn't? If you want to see us as a protagonist, where there's protagonist that started off as the underdog and somehow went on to not just out-survive all the other species, we thrived. Built the pyramids, invented writing, invented cities. We invented technology, the likes of which could destroy us and the whole planet. It's kind of incredible that a species that started from so little, was just one of many, has become this.
Our story begins with an Anglo-Saxon tradition that predates Christmas itself. The wassail, a fertility ritual rooted in pagan magic.
Hello Lucy, welcome to our wassail.
Thank you, thank you.
We're going to bless the apple tree as part of our wassail.
Hello tree.
We are going to sprinkle some cider on the roots.
Yes.
We're going to put some toast on the branches. We're going to sing our wassail song just to make sure that there'll be a good crop of apples next year.
Brilliant.
Cider from this loving cup, too much for mortal man to sup. About thy roots the goodness spread, and help you in the year ahead. If we take some of the bread.
Here you go, Mr. Tree.
Here we come a-wassailing on the winter tide, and here we come to bring good cheer and cast all care aside. Love and joy come to you, and to you your wassail true, and God bless you and send you a happy new year, and God send you a happy new year.
And the last thing we must do is scare off the evil spirits from around the orchard. 1, 2, 3, yay!
The orchard wassail was part of a much bigger midwinter blowout, and it had a surprising influence on the timing of today's Christmas celebrations.
Why is it that there always seems to have been a special festival in the middle of winter?
It's just the perfect time for a party. Number one, there's no work, no fighting, no trading, no farming. Number two, it's the dreariest time of year, so you really need cheering up. Put the two together and it's the festive season.
And what happens to the pagan midwinter festival when Christianity comes along?
Quite simply, Christianity takes it over gloriously and makes it Christmas. If you read the Gospels, there's nothing in them to say exactly at what time of the year Christ was born. Although if it's when shepherds watch their flocks by night, it's most likely to be May or September. But in the 4th century, when Christianity is becoming dominant, Christmas settles at midwinter with this glorious symbolism of the rebirth of the sun, S-U-N, becoming that of the rebirth of the sun, S-O-N. And it's just a wonderful time for a festival.
And do you wassail yourself? Have you got an apple tree?
I have an apple tree and I wassail it myself every year. It never bore any fruit till I started wassailing, had a bumper crop ever since.
It's such a lovely idea, isn't it?
And it's fun.
To the pub, everyone!
Over the years, wassailers started visiting homes and ale houses.
Here we come a-wassailing along the winter tide, and here we come to bring good cheer and cast all care aside. Love and joy come to you.
In return for a blessing, they expected some food, or money, or a drink.
Is this what you were after?
Yay!
And that's the origin of door-to-door carol singing. In 1816, a young curate arrived at his first posting in a small village near Salzburg. Joseph Moore had lived through turbulent times. The Napoleonic Wars had torn Austria apart.
In 1816, just as Moore was beginning his first job, things settled down with the defeat of Napoleon. Now, these wars had completely devastated this part of Europe. 500,000 Austrians had died. And with this in mind, Moore was inspired to write a poem. His motivation comes out in the ending of the first verse. It concludes with the words, "Sleep in heavenly peace."
Stille Nacht, heilige Nacht, alles schläft einsam war, nur das traute Hochheilig.
It was a simple, heartfelt response to the recent conflict, but it would become one of the most popular carols in the world.
Schlaf in himmlischer Ruhe, schlaf in himmlischer Ruhe.
Joseph Moore went on to become the parish priest here in Oberndorf.
But he hadn't forgotten about his poem, and the story goes that on Christmas Eve, 1818, Moore walked across town to find the local church organist, Mr. Gruber. He wanted to ask Gruber to write a tune to go with his words, but here's the challenging part. He wanted it done that day, so that they could perform it that night.
This is the Silent Night Chapel. It was built to commemorate the first performance of the carol, which was accompanied by guitar at midnight mass.
What have you brought to show me?
This is the oldest written record of Silent Night.
Melody by
Franz Xaver Gruber. And text from Joseph Moore in 1816. That's his Christmas song.
Christmas song.
Weihnachtslied.
Is it true, this story of how the music for Silent Night was written in one afternoon?
We think that's exactly what happened. It is quite plausible because the song itself, it's not too complicated. The chord progression is quite simple.
What can you tell me about the first performance?
Well, according to the eyewitness, Mr. Gruber himself, he was the bass, and Joseph Moore, his friend, the priest, sang the top line of the song.
On Christmas Eve?
On Christmas Eve,
1818. Why do you think that they chose the guitar? That's not an instrument that I associate with the church.
That's where the guitar actually comes in. It's a song for the people, from the people. It was an instrument that you would find in taverns and bars, and I think that's what made it connect to the people a lot, because the guitar was something that they knew from outside of the church.
Now this song, Silent Night, has made this little town famous all over the whole world. Why do you think that the song works globally?
The simplicity is what translates into any language and into any culture, and that's what works with pop songs in general.
You would describe it as a pop song?
Exactly. I think it's in the top rank of the Christmas charts.
Silent Night went around the world. It's been translated into more than 230 different languages. And its place in history was secured during the First World War. It happened in northern France on Christmas Eve, 1914.
By this time, the Germans and the British had dug themselves into their trenches, about a stone's throw apart. Some soldiers' families had sent them tiny little Christmas trees made out of pipe cleaners. They had these in the trenches, they lit candles, they'd done everything they could to make themselves feel a bit better. One man who was there in the trenches that night was called Albert Moran.
It was a Christmas card, Christmas Eve. There was a white, beautiful moonlight, frost on the ground, almost white everywhere. And round about, I think about 7 or 8 in the evening, we heard this singing, a lot of commotion, and we saw some lights. I don't know what they were, some lights. And later, we heard them singing, "Still a Silent Night." Still a night, silent night. I shall never forget it. It's one of the highlights of my life, absolutely, to see them. I thought, what a beautiful tune.
And then Albert and the British soldiers sang back. It turned into an impromptu carol service. Across northern France and Belgium, it's been estimated that around 100,000 soldiers took part in this spontaneous Christmas truce. Some soldiers from both sides climbed out of the trenches and met up in the middle. They sang carols, some gave each other Christmas presents, things like tobacco, some even played football, while others took the opportunity to bury the bodies of their comrades who'd fallen in no man's land. Of course, the truce didn't last for long, but the carols had worked their magic. Just for a little while, they'd brought comfort and comradeship and a little bit of peace.
In December 1785, a rather unusual royal wedding took place.
Can I have the rings, please?
The groom was the Prince of Wales, George, the heir to the British throne.
I now pronounce you man and wife.
George has just got married to the love of his life, Maria Fitzherbert. She is 6 years older than him, and she has been married twice before. These things needn't be obstacles to true love, though. Yet there is something a bit strange about this ceremony. It's all happening so secretly in Maria's own drawing room. None of his family have turned up. And that chaplain's a bit dodgy. He's got a criminal record for unpaid debt.
My most fervent wish is realized, my darling. You are my wife, the wife of my heart and my soul, and in the eyes of heaven will ever be.
It's a bit sad, because they may be married in the eyes of heaven, but not in the eyes of the law. Legal impediment number 1, the king, the prince's father, hasn't given his permission for the marriage. Legal impediment number 2, Maria is a Catholic.
This could cause a huge constitutional problem. Under the Act of Settlement, the husband of a Catholic could never become king. So George wanted to keep his wedding a secret from the public and the British Parliament. But that was going to be difficult. Soon, members of Parliament were demanding to know if the prince had forfeited his right to the throne. Whig MP Charles James Fox, a close friend of the prince, stood up in Parliament to answer them.
Fox said that this rumoured marriage not only could never have happened legally, but in fact had never happened in any way whatsoever, and that to suggest otherwise was a malicious falsehood.
George had lied to Fox and told him that the marriage would never happen.
And that's because George wasn't just the Prince of Wales. He was also the Prince of Fibs.
George's lie helped keep the course of royal history right on track. The wedding was brushed aside as legally invalid. George could still one day be king. And this wouldn't be the only time royal secrets would be covered up in this volatile era.
Mathieu, what's happening in this picture?
This is the portrait of Marie Antoinette with her children, and it's very important because it is a political representation of the new Queen of France, because at first she was considered as a selfish woman. So with this portrait, she decided to be represented as a Queen of France. Mm-hmm. We can see here her eldest daughter, who was born in 1778, and here the first Dauphin on the right, who died just before the Revolution, and here in the middle, the new Dauphin.
Marie Antoinette was also looking for other creative ways to improve her PR.
Marie Antoinette loved children, and she took some orphans at court. She paid for their education.
And she did that partly through sincere feeling, and partly it must have helped her image as a selfish person?
I think both. Both. I think she was very sincere when she paid for these children, and probably she had on her mind the image she had all around the public.
Modern historians are reappraising Marie Antoinette's role in the French Revolution. Increasingly, she's seen as an active participant rather than just a passive victim.
She became much more political than her husband during the revolution, because she understood at that time what really happened, and she took some decision, probably not the good one. Her husband didn't take any decision, so he didn't know what to do, but she became at that time the real Queen of France.
The Queen's critics called her Madame Deficit and said she'd bankrupted France. But this was another myth. The French had built up huge debts during the American War of Independence, when France supported the rebels against the British Crown. The war had ended just 4 years earlier, and France still couldn't balance the books.
France supports the independence war of America, and it costed about 1.5 billion. And the budget of France was about 600 millions a year. So that is to say about 2.5 more than an annual budget of France.
Oh, wow.
So it's very important. And the Americans, after their 1783, they decided not to reimburse the France people.
So we have the revenue of France.
Yes.
We have the clothes of Marie Antoinette.
Yes.
But then we have the cost of the war to help America up here somewhere.
Yes. France did not recover from this deficit. So maybe it explains the revolution.
So it wasn't so much Marie Antoinette's extravagance that bankrupted France. It was France's support for the American War of Independence. Thomas Jefferson neglected to mention that a key cause of the French Revolution was the birth of the United States. Marie Antoinette was an Austrian princess. For decades, France and Austria had been enemies. But at the age of 14, Marie Antoinette had been married to the French crown prince to forge a political alliance. But her foreignness would always make her unpopular in France, as would her lavish lifestyle.
It is a terrible thing to be bold. I fear it more than anything in the world. Presents!
Marie Antoinette was notorious for her love of shoes and dresses and parties.
Beautiful. A dress with a bow.
Exaggerated, ludicrous accounts of Marie Antoinette's self-indulgence are circulating everywhere. She's become a sort of poster girl for everything that's wrong with a discontented and starving France. In fact, the US ambassador, who's Thomas Jefferson, will come to say this about her. Had there been no queen, there would have been no revolution. Marie Antoinette is supposed to have come up with one of the most famous phrases in history. She addressed her hungry subjects and proclaimed, "Let them eat cake." The words are still taught to almost every school child in the world. They're used to prove the Queen's indifference to her people. But did she really say, "Let them eat cake"? For a start, the phrase in French is "qu'ils mangent de la brioche," meaning brioche, a kind of an eggy bun. But "let them eat a kind of eggy bun" isn't quite so catchy in translation. But there's a more fundamental cake fib than that. There's absolutely no evidence that Marie Antoinette ever said those words. No documents, no eyewitness reports, no nothing. The phrase had been reported as coming out of the mouth of a different French queen, the wife of Louis XIV a century earlier. It wasn't until 50 years after Marie Antoinette's death that the phrase was first written down and ascribed to her. And even then they said it was a rumour that wasn't true. But politicians and historians around the world were still trying to explain the cause of the revolution. Their narratives needed a royal scapegoat. And by the 20th century, the myth had become a fixture. This is an American history primer from 1918, and they've put it like this. When at last the court, overwhelmed with debts, had so far crushed the people with taxes that they had no bread to eat, Marie Antoinette cried out, "If they have no bread, let them eat cake." The words have been put into her mouth to show how thoughtless and out of touch she was. But worse than that, they've been used to justify the bloody events that followed. Anne Boleyn arrived at Henry's court, fired up with radical ideas. She grew up here at Hever Castle in Kent, the daughter of Lady Elizabeth Howard and an ambitious diplomat, Thomas Boleyn. Thomas secured his younger daughter a coveted position as maid of honour in the French court. And it was there that Anne was introduced to the new ideas that were transforming Europe.
During those years, she came in contact with evangelical Protestants, people who were rethinking old verities, who were coming up with new ways of approaching everything, including faith.
What were these perhaps contentious new religious ideas that Anne was picking up in France?
A key one is the source of authority. So when you're making decisions about religious matters, who do you look to as the authority on that matter? Whether it's the Bible, Scripture, which is what these evangelicals were arguing, or whether you turn to the wisdom of the church. And followers of Luther said that actually the church was flawed, that the Pope was fallible.
Do you think Henry would have taken these ideas about the authority of the Pope to heart if it hadn't been for Anne?
I think Anne's pivotal because we know that Henry hates Luther. Anne obviously had a real hold on his heart and so could introduce ideas to him that other people couldn't possibly say.
And is this something that's been downplayed by the people who see her as just a sex pot?
I think that comes down to pretty misogynistic ways of seeing Henry VIII's wives in the past, actually, and that it's much easier if you can sort of boil them down to being a bit of skirt and not really anything more. And actually, with Anne, we do have something more. She is somebody who makes a massive difference in terms of English history. We could argue that Henry VIII would not have broken with the Roman Catholic Church if it weren't for Anne's influence.
Anne was at court for several years before she turned the king's head. But when she did, Henry became besotted with her. They weren't lovers yet. Instead, in the private moments they had together, Anne took the opportunity to introduce Henry to a radical Protestant book.
The book Anne's showing Henry is called The Obedience of a Christian Man by William Tyndale, the Protestant scholar. Now, this book is controversial. You might even call it seditious. Tyndale's seen as a heretic by the Catholic Church because his book implies that kings have lost their power to the Church. Anne's taken a serious risk smuggling this book out of France and into England, and then she's been bold enough to put it under Henry's nose. She's even marked a special passage for him to read.
Kings, they are but shadows, vain names and things idle, having nothing to do in the world but if our Holy Father needeth their help. This is a book that me and all kings should read.
The little interaction shows Anne beginning to persuade the king that maybe not all radical Protestants are bad, and that maybe breaking with Rome could hold advantages from them both.
Anne was winning Henry round to some Protestant ideas. And she refused to sleep with the king until he'd made her his new queen. But there were many obstacles in her way. Henry was still married, and his wife had many supporters at court.
Eustace Chapuis was devoted to Charles V, who just happened to be the nephew of Catherine of Aragon. Chapuis really loved Catherine of Aragon. It was said that he venerated her like a saint. And partly as a result of this, he really hated Anne Boleyn. In his letters to Charles V, Chapuis describes Anne as more Lutheran than Luther, and he slut-shamed her. He called her the concubine and the whore. And Chapuis really set up this image of Anne that does survive to this day as the wicked, evil seductress, as the original other woman. Anne's genuine intelligence and sense of political strategy just don't fit into this soap opera version of the story.
In 1532, Thomas Cromwell became Henry's chief minister. Unlike Henry, he was a radical Protestant who saw Luther as a progressive force. An ally of Anne Boleyn, he saw the king's great matter as an opportunity to advance the Protestant cause. So Cromwell began to weave some expert political propaganda. He assured Henry that there was a way to get him his divorce, improve his finances, and enhance his political power. It would just take 2 Acts of Parliament. The first was drafted in 1533.
This is the real, actual act in restraint of appeals. And because this act banned appealing to the Pope in ecclesiastical matters, it meant that Catherine was now banned from appealing to the Pope in her and Henry's great matter. From this point onwards, it would be Parliament, not the Pope, it would be London, not Rome, that would be the final authority on the constitutional affairs of England.
By this time, Anne had succumbed to Henry's advances. And in January 1533, before the act had even been passed, Anne discovered she was pregnant. To make sure a potential baby boy was legitimate, they quickly got married. Henry, who was still married to Catherine, was now a bigamist. The Pope expelled him from the Catholic Church. This guaranteed that Henry would burn in hell for eternity.
But Henry didn't seem to mind too much, because with Cromwell busy drafting his revolutionary acts, Henry seemed to feel that his powers were limitless.
A year later, Cromwell produced a second bill, the Act of Supremacy. This made Henry the supreme head of a new Church of England and severed all ties with Rome.
But how could he possibly justify this massive break with Rome? Well, the first clue comes in the very first line of the Act in Restraint of Appeals, where we begin to see Cromwell emerging as one of history's biggest fibbers. It says, by diverse and sundry old authentic histories and chronicles, it's manifestly declared and expressed that this realm of England is an empire, governed by one supreme head and king having the dignity and royal estate of the imperial crown. What he's saying here is that Henry rules an empire. He is an emperor, as kings of England have been for centuries. And emperors are beholden to nobody, certainly not to the Pope. But where did this whole idea of empire come from? Who was Cromwell kidding?
The truth is that Henry had no empire beyond the British Isles, apart from a precarious foothold in Calais that was increasingly expensive to defend from the French. But Cromwell wasn't about to let facts like these get in the way of his master plan. To justify the passage of power from Rome to London, he manipulated English history.
This is the 12th century book that Cromwell used as his source and his justification. It's the history of the kings of Britain by a Welsh monk called Geoffrey of Monmouth. And in it, he takes the story of the kings of Britain right back to one of Britain's best-loved legends, King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table. But this is really pseudo-history. It's more like a collection of fairy stories. But these fairy stories were the diverse and sundry old authentic histories and chronicles Cromwell was relying upon for his claim that England really was an empire.
In November 1588, Queen Elizabeth I held a procession through London. This was her victory parade.
The Queen made her way through the city to St. Paul's to give thanks. God and his chosen special monarch together had saved the day. They were the hero and the heroine at the heart of this narrative. But in reality, though, things weren't quite so heroic.
Elizabeth's promise at Tilbury to reward her soldiers proved to be empty rhetoric. The war had drained Elizabeth's coffers. The The sailors who fought for England were hit by disease and were still fighting for their wages. The Crown threatened prison for those slanderously suggesting that they hadn't been paid.
William Cecil now rubs salt into the wound. He said, well, if the soldiers die of illness, then at least the Crown won't have to pay them. By the end of 1588, more than half of the men who'd fought in the Armada campaign were dead, and they were killed not by the Spanish, but by disease and starvation.
The reality of post-Armada England was economic crisis and an increasingly unpopular queen. It was time for a royal makeover. Elizabeth is now in her 50s, unmarried, and too old to produce the all-important heir to the throne. Her lustrous red locks have gone. Her face is pockmarked. More than ever, Elizabeth must conceal her frailties.
Elizabeth has to manufacture an image of eternal youth. She needs to present herself as something more than merely mortal. On goes the white lead makeup to cover up her smallpox scars, and a red wig to cover up her grey hair. This is Elizabeth I as the Virgin Queen. She's married, but only to her country. And this isn't just an image for her courtiers. Everyone in England will see this. It's like a Tudor profile pic. And the handle is Gloriana. What we're seeing here is the creation of an Elizabethan marketing campaign. Elizabeth had lots of different portraits of herself commissioned, and they were sent out across England, across Europe, and all of them were loaded with propaganda messages. They said that Queen Elizabeth I is pure, that she's powerful, that she's going to make England great again.
The Queen, who's been remembered as a feeble puppet, was in fact now ready to dismiss her lifelong friend. Sarah resorted to blackmail. To back up the rumours about Anne's sexuality, she said she'd publish intimate letters the Queen had sent her over the years. So what is the truth about Anne's sexuality? These letters are often taken as so-called evidence that Queen Anne was our lesbian queen. What's your take on the letters as support for that or not?
Well, I mean, the letters obviously don't contain anything that explicit about some carnal relationship. So I think the only thing we do know that for which there is evidence in the letters is the emotional intensity of their relationship, especially on Anne's part.
Sarah said that Anne's letters were sometimes full of flames of extravagant passion. What sort of thing was she referring to?
She was referring to letters like this one. I have been in expectation of you a long time, but can stay no longer without desiring to know what you intend to do with me, for it is most certain I can't go to bed without seeing you. Could you see my heart, you would find I have not one thought but what I ought to have, the dear woman who my soul loves.
The dear woman who my soul loves. Mm-hmm. Such a special feeling to read such an intimate letter.
Yeah.
I truly feel that if you were a royal woman as well, you would be married off at a young age to an arranged match that was all about producing the kids, really. So you would naturally seek emotional fulfilment, wouldn't you?
Yeah, I mean, Anne did, I think, she did really love her husband, but there's certainly no correspondence like this between her and George. I mean, the suggestion that there is something unnatural about Anne's feelings for other women really originates from Sarah herself. So here we have Sarah writing to Anne about Anne having no inclination for any but of one's own sex.
So the evidence for Anne being what we might call gay is shaky. But after Sarah's threat of blackmail, the relationship between the once close friends broke down completely.
Sarah knows she's gone too far and she tries to patch things up. But for Anne, too little, too late.
You are my friend and my queen.
Whatever you have to say, you may put in writing.
Why have you forsaken me for her?
You said you desired no answer, and I will give you none.
If I tormented you, or did not behave with decency...
Whatever you have to say, you may put in writing.
But dearest Anne, why?
You said you desired no answer, and I will give you none.
The Queen's best friend forever has just been defriended.
Officially, it was the local Soviets' decision to execute the royal family, not Lenin's. But Helen Rappaport is sceptical. Helen, what's the evidence that Lenin was involved in this decision to kill the Romanovs?
It's very difficult to actually really confirm it in terms of hard physical paper evidence, because the whole objective of Soviet historiographers ever since was to protect Lenin's reputation and make out that he was always a good guy of the revolution. He wouldn't murder little children, would he? But Lenin certainly was a control freak. He was in charge. In this telegram sent on the 16th, the word comes from Ekaterinburg to Lenin: tell him we can't wait any longer, the city's going to fall. We need to go ahead with the Sud, which was the sentence that they had agreed previously in Moscow, that the family should be murdered because the city was going to fall. And it says, if you don't agree with us going ahead with it, let us know quickly, pretty much. So that was telling Moscow that they were going to go ahead, and effectively they did that night, the 16th.
It's quite clever. The telegram doesn't say, we're going to kill them.
No,
it says,
no.
we're going to do what we agreed earlier.
Yeah.
Having executed Nicholas, as well as his wife and children, the Bolsheviks might have eliminated one problem, but they've created a brand new one as well. Murdering a royal mother and her children was going to provoke international condemnation of the new communist regime. And here comes one of the biggest lies of the whole revolution. This press release will be picked up by newspapers all around the world. And it says, the ex-Tsar has been shot on the orders of the local Soviet, and that Nicholas Romanov's wife and son have been taken to a secure place. Now that's not true, and it's chilling. The bodies of the Romanovs were buried in a nearby forest. The lies told about the royal family led to a lingering belief that the youngest daughter, Anastasia, had somehow survived. If the princess were alive, then she'd become the last hope for a restoration of the Romanov dynasty. The true fate of Anastasia would remain a mystery for decades. Here tells us that Maria Martin is buried nearby. She was aged just 25 years. We can't see her actual gravestone because it was chipped to pieces by souvenir hunters, and there isn't a trace of it left. William Corder's crime created a weird industry in what we might call murder souvenirs. Anyone who had the cash could buy one of these ceramic models of the Red Barn, take it home, have it on your own mantelpiece. Slightly more exclusive
were knickknacks made out of the timbers of the Red Barn itself. This is a little snuff box in the shape of a shoe. But items associated with the crime were more valuable. These were the actual pistols. These are what he used to shoot her. Ascending up the scale of gruesomeness, this is a book about William Corder, written by a journalist from the Times. You'd think it was just a book until you open up the cover and you read that the leather binding is made from the skin of the murderer, taken from his body and tanned by a surgeon from the Suffolk Hospital. But top of the tree, absolutely most gruesome of all, this is the back of William Corder's head. It's the skin from his scalp. You can see on it the little hairs, and just over here is the murderer's ear.
The tale of Maria Martin showed how a crime of passion in rural Suffolk could become a national source of entertainment. It elevated William Corder into one of the most notorious murderers of the century.